This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Why are we upset if we're creating jobs?
Inflation's still a thing out there for the everyday consumer.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
The economic calendar jam-packed today.
And Michael Barr with news.
Tensions between the U.S. and China have heated up even more.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, and Lisa Mateo here on a Friday. It's summer. It's Sleepy Friday. Wednesday off. You know, we're sort of sliding the weekend. Not. The bond market moves. We're looking at equities. What is it? Forple-witching? Something like that in the equity market?
Lisa Mateo's all over it. So
She's all over. She's going to report to us.
Yes, exactly.
She's all negative gamma. And yeah, she's still having yogurt, but she's negative gamma. The bond market moves. I came in, I looked at my launch pad on Bloomberg. Paul, it is screaming with Veronica Clark starting out. That's great. Yep. I got yield curve dynamics. I got a 10-year real yield under 1.97, and the 10-year nominal yield, the one we all look at, is 4.22 is the handle right now. Yields breakdown.
And I can go out and get a 30-year mortgage today, Tom, at 6.94%. That's the first time it's been below 7% in a while. Still well above where a lot of folks are today, but even that's coming down a little bit.
Ian Ling and BMO Capital Markets channels Victoria Clark, Veronica Clark. I'll get it right, please. Don't leave the studio. Don't leave the studio. Anyways, he channels Citigroup and says the Citigroup Economic Surprise Index is down to a 2-year low. We'll talk about that in a moment. We're on YouTube. Subscribe, search Bloomberg Podcast, growing every day. It's a new experience.
It is.
I'm still not used to it.
But you're all over. You're in there chatting with all.
We're chatting with the live chat going from all over the world, and you know, some of these people. These people have huge portfolio's.
Oh, I know.
Out on YouTube.
Yep.
I mean, they like none of them do not own NVIDIA.
Right.
What did NVIDIA do yesterday? What, up another 4%?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. And our good friends,
thank you, Rich.
Big institutional investors, they're still all in. I mean, we talked to some people yesterday that were just, you have to be there. And I was like, okay, all right.
On your commute on Friday, out to the beach as well. Listen on Apple CarPlay, Android Play as well. From the Interactive Broker Studios, the Bloomberg Business Brief, Lisa Mateo.
You got it, yeah. And Wall Street might experience some volatility today. You guys talked about it, triple witching. Yes, $5.5 trillion of stock index ETF options all expired today. So right now, let's get to the markets. We have NASDAQ futures, little change, down about 8 points, 20,022. Then we have Dow futures, little change, down 19 points, 39,556. And then S&P futures, little change, down 4 points at 5,539. Over to the bond market. Let's look at the 2-year yield, 4.70%. That's down 3 basis points. We have the 10-year yield, 4.23%, and that's down 3 basis points. Today, we get a read on existing home sales. We also have the Conference Board issuing their index of leading economic indicators for May. As far as companies making news, one of them is Huawei. Its competition with Apple in the Chinese market is heating up. That U.S. sanctioned company says it's closing in on 1 billion active consumer devices. Apple shares right now, they're up about 0.2%. Meanwhile, sources say China pushing Visa and MasterCard to lower their bank card transaction fees in the country. It's part of an effort to make payments easier for foreign visitors. And CDK Global now says it was hit by not one, but back-to-back cyber attacks that may be several days before a lot of car dealers who use their software are back online. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Now joining us, Vivi Clark, Veronica Victoria Clark here with Citigroup. Of course, they're economists, writing her with Andrew Hollenhorst over all of the Citigroup platform. You guys are at September on a cut. The market on my screen on a sleepy Friday morning is screaming at me. Something's going on. Is it always the case the market ends up telling the economists at the Fed what to do?
I mean, we know that the Fed will never surprise the market. So in some sense, the market will tell the Fed maybe sometimes what to do. But we always try to make our forecast not based on market pricing, not even necessarily based on what we hear from Fed officials, but just on where we think the data are going and how we think Fed officials will react to that.
So what is the data telling you here? Is the data telling you that the first 3 months of the year where we had some stickier than expected inflation, Is that kind of where the market is, or is it kind of what we've seen in maybe the last couple of months, which we still see some more moderation?
Yeah, I think we're certainly more on the moderation side of things, especially on the economic activity side. There has obviously been some stickiness to inflation, and if anything, the 2% inflation that we had second half of last year, that looked too low. It's not surprising to see some strength in Q1, averaging out still something around 2.5% to 3% inflation. But I think more importantly, we definitely see activity slowing down. We see the labor market loosening, the unemployment rate at 4%, and I think anything beyond 4%, the Fed is not going to be very happy with.
Right. So, I mean, again, we've got some consumer data recently. How do you view the consumer here? I guess we were talking before we even started this morning about that bifurcated consumer out there. Some folks, I guess it's a K-shaped economic recovery that some people talk about. I pay attention.
He's gone from V-shaped to K-shaped.
Yes.
No, we certainly see signs that the consumer is struggling, especially maybe those lower income consumers. Savings rates are very low. Delinquency rates on credit cards and auto loans have risen. Obviously, we've seen the loosening of the labor market. And yeah, we've had now 4 or 5 months of retail sales data that have been surprising lower, consumption moving a bit sideways. And it's been in goods spending. It's been in even things like restaurants. We saw that in retail sales earlier this week. It does feel like the consumer is pulling back.
A question I would ask a vice chairman of the Fed, let's go with it with Citigroup if we can, in that do you have any sense of the glide path lowering yields off your September call? There's a percolating asymptotic and asymptote study down to 2 or 2.x or whatever, which just tells me out there. Are you and Andrew Hollenhorst, do you have a confidence in the x-axis right now?
Yeah, I mean, it does feel like there is a lot of room for yields to move lower. Our call is still, I think, a relatively aggressive one. We have the Fed cutting in September, which is maybe not so out of consensus now, but we have them cutting 200 basis points every meeting after that, so 25 a meeting consistently, and that doesn't seem like consensus.
I agree. I mean,
that would
you
be
guys are
much more
massive.
aggressive. Yeah.
You guys are massive Greenspannian measured, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, that would be much more aggressive cuts than the market is pricing right now, but it really does come down to, we think that the labor market is entering a much softer period, and the Fed would be reactive to that.
So, I mean, the labor market, I don't know. All my offspring are hired and employed, thank goodness.
What's that about?
I don't know. I have no idea that, because I cut them off, I guess, is kind of probably the reason why. But so talk to us about the labor market. How do you see that? Because still the 4% or 3.9%, to me, that's full employment, more or less.
Yeah. On a level basis, the unemployment rate is still low. Obviously, payroll job gains have been very strong, very out of line with what we've seen in that household survey that determines the unemployment rate, though. But I think what we're seeing is, for about 9 months now, we've seen hiring really pull back. We see that in the hiring rate in the JOLT survey. That's at 10-year lows. You see that in survey data, watching the PMIs this morning. You've seen an increase in part-time employment, a decline in hours worked, all these early signs that employers are looking to cut labor costs. What they're not doing yet are the big layoffs. That's the last step. That's the more dramatic step. But we have seen a rise in initial jobless claims now in the last couple weeks. It feels like maybe we're reaching that point of a non-linear weakening in the labor market once the layoffs really do start.
Are we seeing price cutting where demand's soft? I mean, I yesterday, that lunch I had, it's our summer lunch with Sparta, the head of
Oh, nice.
all of what I do. Sparta took me to the 3rd Avenue McDonald's.
Exactly.
He got out of
$5 meal.
He got out of there for $12.87.
Exactly. Big spender.
With the tax. Good morning, Mayor Adams. But is there a price cutting thing to come?
Yeah, it feels anecdotally like maybe businesses are cutting prices. We certainly hear that from some retailers. There are some price pressures even on the goods side still. We've seen shipping costs come up, commodity prices come up. I think maybe those two are counteracting. It's much harder to pass on those cost increases to consumers now. So maybe goods prices are moving a bit sideways to slightly lower. Definitely not getting that very strong inflation in goods that we had, when shipping costs came up 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
How about where you're from? Research Triangle Park.
Yes.
Raleigh, Durham. How's the economy down there?
That's a pretty booming part of the country. That experienced the inflows during the pandemic. There's been some pretty strong population growth there for a while. But I've lived here now. I've lived in New York for a while.
What colleges are in that area?
All right, so you got NC State in Raleigh, you got Duke in Durham, you got something in Chapel. Then even close by, you got Wake Forest and whoever that is.
Yeah.
So you got a nice little collection there, and so they call it the
And
research.
everyone's in the Big Ten.
Everybody's in the Big Ten now. We're going to go play Nebraska. So it's Research Triangle Park, RTP. Got to be before there was the Silicon Valley, there was RTP.
No, that's exactly right.
Yep.
And it's really been successful.
Yep,
Veronica Victoria, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having
Veronica
me.
Clark holding court at Citigroup. I can't say enough about the bond market right now. Quoting on yields, futures at -3. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom. Paul, Lisa. The Supreme Court will deliver more opinions this morning with a large caseload and time running out. 17 cases are still left to come down in the Supreme Court, with more than half of those with major political and social significance. A lot is going into the packed next 7 days or so before the justices go on their summer break. Loyola law professor Jessica Levinson.
There's the big question of whether or not former presidents enjoy absolute or qualified immunity from criminal prosecution. There's another big question that will affect the criminal trials pending against Trump, or at least one of them, dealing with whether or not the obstruction statute that Trump is charged under is a good fit for what happened on January 6th, or if that really just has to involve some type of evidence tampering.
Law professor Jessica Levinson spoke to CBS. Security fencing is up around the Supreme Court. Wildfires have destroyed hundreds of buildings in New Mexico. President Biden approved a major disaster declaration for the state, sending more federal help for devastated communities. Parents across Europe are rallying to make it normal for young kids to live smartphone-free. From Spain to Ireland and Britain, groups are ballooning on chat groups like WhatsApp and agreeing to link arms and refuse to buy children younger than 12 smartphones. Some say they shouldn't have the devices until the ages of 14 or 16. In Birmingham, Alabama, fans came out to celebrate Willie Mays and others who played in the Negro League. Historic Rickwood Field hosted its first Major League Baseball game between the San Francisco Giants and St. Louis Cardinals. Willie Mays' son, Michael.
If there's any way on earth my father could come down here, he would.
Willie Mays passed several days ago. After an emotional tribute, they played the game. The Cardinals won 6-5. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, what an honor to speak years ago to 78-year-old Reggie Jackson about Willie Mays. I clearly remember it. Yeah, I think it was on Bloomberg on the economy. I can't remember which show. But can I state that Reggie Jackson just possibly stole the show yesterday?
Oh, if you get a chance, folks, look that up. I'm sure it's on YouTube. The speech that Jackson gave about playing in the Negro Leagues and his tribute to Raleigh Fingers and all the other guys like that who are white and helped him at the time overcome racism. I mean, it's really emotional.
Yeah, we should mention as well that Reggie Jackson's father played for the Newark Eagles
Yep.
a few years ago, and they. It was really quite something, what we saw yesterday. Got lots to talk about here on a Friday. It's not a relaxed Friday here. In economics, finance, and investment, I'm going to be blunt. The bond market moves on a technical basis. We go through all sorts of important levels. 10-year real yield, 1.97%. The nominal 10-year yield is 4.23%. Really critical levels. Bloomberg surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this Bloomberg Business Flash brought to you by Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer focuses the power of their thinking on you, creating customized plans to help achieve your goals. Put the power of Oppenheimer thinking into your investing. Call an Oppenheimer professional today. All right, to the markets we go, where futures, well, we're in the red, and this is the AI rally shows some signs of slowing. This after inflows into tech reached a weekly record of $8.7 billion. That's according to Strategist at Bank of America. So right now we have NASDAQ futures, little change, down about 12 points. Dow futures, little change too, down about 18. S&P futures, little change, down about 5. The two-year yield, 4.70%. That's down 3 basis points. We have the yield on the 10-year, 4.23%. That's down 2 basis points. Since we talk about those inflows into tech funds, we've got to check out shares of NVIDIA. Lower before the bell, down about 1%. And this is after CEO Jensen Huang unloaded almost $32 million of shares in the company. Then you have Amazon. Their shares up 0.2%. The company plans to revamp its Alexa service, but it comes with a price tag. Reuters reporting it'll include conversational Gen AI, 2 tiers of service, the higher one costing anywhere between $5 and $10 a month. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Did you say conversational AI?
Yes. You can have a conversation with Alexa.
Come on now. Of course you can. Why not?
It'll
Do
cost
you have it in your house?
No. I mean, I got the Alexa thing, the Siri thing. I feel like I'm on top of things. That's all I need.
What does Alexis do with dogs barking? You know, right. if Vet Bill goes mental, which
you could say, Alexa, tell Vet Bill to stop barking. And
really?
she will say, Vet Bill, stop barking.
I just don't get it. Good morning, everyone. It's a Friday. It's not sleepy. We're get the
live.
Garden State Parkway report from Paul Sweeney. What do you see on the Garden State Parkway this morning?
Friday.
Other than helicopter noise.
Wednesday, Juneteenth, exactly. Wednesday, Juneteenth, we were driving down a parkway to the Jersey Shore. It was the most crowded I've seen the parkway in like years. I don't know what was going on. Everybody's saying, oh, we got this Wednesday off in the summer. Let's go to the shore.
But you said the shore was cooler.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's sweatshirt weather yesterday on the Jersey Shore because the water temperature is 58, which I blame Lisa Mateo for because we were solid mid-60s until Lisa and her family came down, and then it's been 58 ever since. I don't know what's going on.
Major shout out to people working outdoors in this stuff.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'm looking out at Central Park, and they're not slacking off. They're out there working.
They're working hard, yeah.
You know, major shout out. This is a joy. Kona Hake joins us right now, ED&F man on commodities. And particularly on, Paul, because Paul's a pro. He calls it softs. Kona, let's go to the weather. We've got Rob Carolan coming up top of the 9 o'clock hour on the drought easing away. Kona, I got a headline off Euronews. Barcelona grapples with the future of tourism. Finally, they got rain after a 4-year drought. How is drought now affecting the softs worldwide?
Yes, we are seeing droughts increasing in frequency in the last several years. And I've been covering agricultural commodities for over 20 years now. And in my career, I don't remember seeing such an increase in frequency of droughts. So obviously, this is going to have a huge impact on agricultural commodity supplies. It's fine when you have a lot of stocks. And for a lot of the grains, we do have a lot of stocks. So they can almost, no pun intended, they can weather these unusual weather events. But the reality is that when you don't have sufficient stocks, then this becomes a problem. So today for grains like wheat, corn, soybeans, we have a lot of stockpiles right now in the USA. Brazil had a big crop. So it's fine if you start seeing droughts here and there, short term. Longer term, though, we have to build enough of a buffer to counteract this effect. So what we're seeing now is grains are okay, but if you turn to the soft commodities, which is coffee, sugar, and cocoa, we're noticing that Brazil's looking a little bit dry. That's causing not necessarily alert, but sort of keeping an eye open for potential prolonged dry weather in the likes of Brazilian coffee regions and also sugarcane regions, because I think that could be an issue.
Kona, I'm looking at my GLCO, Global Commodity Prices monitor on the Bloomberg terminal. I see cocoa up 128% year to date. Can you explain to me what's going on in the world of cocoa?
Oh my God, cocoa is it's a classic supply-demand story where you just have the incredible deficit. This is the third or fourth consecutive deficit in a row. And the deficit you're seeing today is not a small one, it's chunky. And you're not going to fix that overnight because the Ivory Coast and Ghana, who are the two biggest producers in Africa, in the world of cocoa, they're not going to be able to recover production anytime soon. And the demand side is very inelastic. People don't just suddenly stop consuming chocolate because the pass-through from the cocoa beans to the retailers to the actual chocolate manufacturer is very, very slow. So I think, you're not seeing chocolate consumption diminish fast enough to cause a demand-led destruction, which will then readdress that supply-demand imbalance. So the solution will only come from supply. And unfortunately, the Ivory Coast, the trees are very old and disease-prone. And yes, there's a certain element of climate change impacts there as well. You just haven't got enough time or resources to fix the yields there to provide a solution fast enough. And I think the market's just woken up to it.
I'm surprised. I mean, is the market unable to kind of find supply other places, or is the only place on the planet where you can grow cocoa is in those African countries?
So 80% of the world's cocoa is produced in West Africa.
Wow.
Then you have pockets grown in South America, Ecuador, Brazil. They are growing. So they are growing from a small base. They've seen the attractive price today, and they're definitely going to ramp up. And I think longer term, that's where you're going to see all the expansion, because there's just not enough investment happening in Africa to counteract the recent decline.
Conar, Javier Blas, I bust his chops about Spanish olive oil, but the fact is, Mr. Blas is leading worldwide on drought analysis. This week he puts out a terrific chart, the advance of the southwest monsoon across India. And the short story, folks, is it's happening, but it's behind. It's late this year. Tell us, Kona, about the monsoon and rice across Robert Kaplan's monsoon from Oman over to Indonesia. What's rice going to do?
Yeah, so rice was very tight. The markets were very tight the last year and a bit. India had a rice export ban, and they're the world's largest exporter. Thailand had a drought, as you mentioned, causing severe decline in rice yields. So, and Asia, for Asians, rice is the staple. It's the potatoes of the UK. It's the grains of the USA. Without rice, you get food inflation, and that's what happened. And unfortunately, there just wasn't enough. The monsoons are absolutely critical to help the rice yields recover. The monsoons have been slow. And there's the southern parts of India has had a good amount of rainfall, but in the north there's been a bit of a deficit. But the north is also more irrigated, so we're not too concerned at this stage of the slowness of the monsoon in India. Let's watch out, because it could improve again. But on the other hand, if it doesn't, then I think there could be some worries.
Konahik, thank you. What a great brief. Konahik, thank you. Love doing this soft commodities.
I do, and
it's like Mary Poppins, railways to India.
Right,
it's
exactly.
It's out there.
And we again, this GLCO screen for Bloomberg Terminal, it's got everything on there: the softs, the grains and oilseeds, the livestock, lean hogs up 34% year to date. Does that mean my BLT is going to cost more?
Well, I don't know about the BLT. She hasn't had one in 6 years. We go to surveillance nutrition correspondent Lisa Mateo. Lisa, orange juice. It's through the moon. We didn't have time to talk about it. Is orange juice allowed at the Mateo house?
Freshly squeezed. Yes.
Okay.
Freshly squeezed, but if you put a little pulp in it, it's good because you get the fiber too in it. So yes, drink it with the pulp.
Your kids didn't rebel against you? I mean, your kids bought off on all this stuff?
You're not.
My kids have no choice.
You're not serving the kids screwdrivers at 8 a.m.
No screwdrivers at the Mateo house. Can't drink a screwdriver.
Is juice good for you or not?
If you have it in if you don't have too much, because there's a lot of sugar in it. It's natural sugar, but you can't have too much of it. That's why you have a small glass.
That's what I always ask my mother. Why do you give me this small glass?
That's why you have the small glass.
I just went 8 hours with no.
See, your mother knew.
My mother knew. Okay.
Did you supposed to have a small glass?
Yeah, I hate that. I just went 8 hours with no.
We had a thing years ago where they forced me to drink kale juice here.
Ooh, yeah.
Tanya Chen and Courtney Collins. I've never recovered, Lisa. It's terrible.
It's pretty tough.
It's undrinkable.
It is. Yeah, I can't do it.
A report on a Friday with our surveillance nutrition
Yes.
correspondent, Lisa Mateo. Futures -3. The bond market moves. We'll have more on that. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
All right, coming up, we are going to get this market going a little bit. We got futures kind of mixed. There's really nothing going on with the futures market here. I guess that befits a Friday in the summer. S&P futures down 2 points.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures, well, we've got red and green on the screen right now, and this is after more Fed speak. We have Minneapolis Fed President Neil Kashkari said inflation on the way back down to 2%, but getting there, well, it's going to take some time. Right now, we have S&P futures, little change, same for Dow and NASDAQ futures. We'll head over to the 2-year yield, the 4.70%, that's down 3 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.23%, that's down 2 basis points. Commodities, haven't touched on that yet. We'll get to spot gold higher at $2,365 an ounce. Brent crude $85 a barrel. WTI crude $81 a barrel. Nike reports earnings next week, but one analyst from Williams Trading is cutting his price target. He's telling investors to sell the stock, saying it's, quote, too expensive. Nike shares right now up about 1%. And American Airlines flight attendants, well, they may be inching closer to that strike after the latest round of contract talks. Well, that ended without an agreement. Shares of American Airlines down about 0.1%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Okay, 45 seconds here. Paul, not Paul Sweeney, Paul somebody else. Paul M., thank you so much. Good morning from Garden State. Beach is already full. Now, Seagirt is where you go if you're wearing a suit and tie, right?
Right. Spring Lake, Seagirt,
it's
that whole
like
area.
fancy, like a bud in a can costs $6.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But is it Seaside?
Seaside.
It's
Seaside.
different than Seagirt.
Yes. Seaside's a little bit south. It's where the kids go. It's a lot of fun, a lot of partying, stuff like that.
They
Great
don't play
boardwalk.
Bruce anymore. What music did they play?
I don't know.
They're not playing Nickelback. Please. We now go to surveillance EDM queen, Lisa Mateo. Would you do that again?
That's when you see Seaside. That's what all the kids want to go.
Okay, Matt Miskin is like, I'm getting out of this conversation right now. Saving us from Boston, John Hancock's Matt Miskin, their co-chief investment strategist. Matt, it's not a normal Friday. Yields are breaking down. I got a 10-year yield virtually on a sell signal, lower yield, and I got a 10-year real yield, 1.98% as well. Is the track at John Hancock higher price and lower yields for fixed income?
It is, Tom. And yeah, we're thinking we're setting up for a nice back half of the bond market. So we're going to get about a 3% yield from here on out to the end of the year. We think duration is going to be a tailwind. We're getting disinflationary readings. After Q1 inflation impulse, we think that's fading. The housing market's starting to slow. Used car prices starting to fall. And even in retailers, we're starting to see price cuts. This is all good news for the bond market. But the bond market's a bit asleep at the wheel this summer. Yields haven't fallen that much, with even initial jobless claims rising. So we think that's a story to come here in the coming months and quarters. And we got to get in the bond market because it can move fast. These yields move quickly. We want to take advantage of it.
So, Matt, I'm looking at the 10-year Treasury here today at about 4.23%. Where do you think we end the year for the 10-year Treasury?
So last year, it was an incredible year. We started the year at 3.88. Went as low as 330, high as 5, end of the year at 3.88. And it was just a roller coaster. And this year, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a similar scenario where you're up already. The first half was about the inflation impulse, the growth impulse that's starting to roll over. We wouldn't be surprised if we're actually lower than when we started the year at 3.88. And that would be a great backdrop for bonds. We're also getting about 5 to 6% in income. Like I said, we're halfway there. But lower yields, higher price, as Tom said.
Do I take credit risk here, Matt, or do I just sit in my 2-year Treasury where the U.S. government's going to pay me close to 5% here?
Yeah, so it is tempting, and credit has done so well. It's been a tough place to be underweight, frankly, but defaults are rising, downgrades are rising. We're seeing weaker fundamentals in lower quality parts of the corporate space. So we are underweighting high yield. We've got a little bit. We're trying to really go at the higher end, the double Bs and even the triple Bs. But our primary allocation is single A. Single A is,
right.
That'd be a great grade for us. And so lower default risk. And we're playing duration. So we're a bit further on the curve than the 2. We're more like 6 years intermediate.
So you're going to take your maturity out to translate that into what we mere mortals talk. I get that. And you're going to see a yield come down or at least price resilient. What do equities do? Are they linked anymore? Or are we to a new NVIDIA paradigm?
All right. So small caps, low quality small caps were the most correlated to treasuries in history coming into the last couple months. And I think this week or the last week or so is the breaking of that stage. It's like a kid growing out of a stage or a phase for markets. And actually longer duration quality stocks used to be the correlated to treasuries. We think that actually comes back. So really what's happening is inflation's coming down and everyone's like, yes, inflation's coming down, less rate cuts. But lower inflation means lower revenue growth. That's basically what inflation is companies passing on higher prices to consumers. They can't do that anymore. And so lower inflation means fewer companies can benefit from that. And that means pricing power wins out. Those quality companies win out.
Program note out on YouTube right now on our live chat. Thank you to our team. One of our interns did this.
Okay.
I think the intern from Chapel Hill.
Yep.
Or
Very good.
NC State. They put out the Reggie Jackson interview from last night in Birmingham, Alabama. Look to the YouTube live chat and you can get that interview. Mr. Jackson's comments start about 5 minutes in. Paul?
Okay, very good. Hey, Matt, just kind of stepping back here, what do you expect, or what are you guys kind of modeling in for the U.S. Federal Reserve here? Because we've got some central banks around the world starting to move here.
Yeah, we think the Fed is going to be left behind. All the cool kids are already cutting rates, and the Fed can't join them. And it's really that Q1. And this is the conundrum always with a late cycle environment with monetary policy. You're using lagging data. It's never going to give you a all clear sign to cut rates because there's always this late cycle risk on impulse that then creates inflation right into the end. And so we think the Fed is going to be on hold, and actually that's going to cause the problem. Something's going to break, and then they're going to have to move quickly. You got to be in the bond market before they move, though, because if you miss the drop in yields, that's like 5 years of bond returns in 12 months.
Matt, long ago and far away, you're too young for this. There was a thing called Sequoia, which said buy 10 stocks. That was revolutionary at the time. And then, the people down Boylston Street on Devonshire, Fidelity did Fidelity 50, and off we went to portfolio concentration. I just looked at a fund which has gone from roughly 51 or 52% top 10 holdings to a stunning 56% top 10 holdings. Is it okay in our retirement plans to have a blue chip portfolio, tech laden, where it's 54 or 56 or 58% in 10 stocks?
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know, learning old school type analysis, I believe in reversion to the mean. I do, and I think this concentration is historic. It is historic. I mean, that's the data. This is an outlier. You're never seeing 10 stocks represent only almost 40% of the S&P 500. So reversion to the mean suggests that that's going to move down, that they're not going to be that big. But it could be worse, right? It could be that these companies don't make money, that they're not great companies. These companies have great profit margins, great balance sheets, great return on equity. We're overweight tech. We've been overweight tech for the last 5 years. And that's the best earnings engine in the world. So I don't think it's the worst thing, but I do think you got to look at mid cap. It's cheap. It's higher quality and small. I don't love small cap because 40% of the companies don't make money. And so I think that's a lower quality part of the market. But you go into mid cap, you can diversify some of that valuation risk. And if there's reversion to the mean, you end up benefiting from it long term.
Matt, how about valuation in this market here? We've seen such a big move really over the last 12 months here. Have earnings kept up, or are we kind of pushing the outer limits of valuation?
So it's a 1-2 punch too here. It's not just the valuation. So the valuation's 21 times. That's highest basically outside of the tech bubble. And even technology here is at about 30, 31. That's the highest since the tech bubble. So valuation is definitely getting rich. And then the second punch here is that the earnings estimates for the rest of the year, stellar. It's like the high jump, and the bar just got raised by analysts. Q1 wasn't that bad for the earnings bar, but now we've got about 8-9% earnings growth projected here for Q2, Q3, Q4. It's like 14% earnings growth. So you got high valuations, high earnings estimates. Bond market's going to pay you about 5 to 6% in high quality income. They don't have an earnings bar in the bond market. They just got to pay you interest. So it's making bonds about as competitive to equities, but I get it. There's momentum right now. That's been the thing. It's been hard to fight. We do have high quality there, but we're cautious on equities. We're more optimistic on bonds.
Matt, thank you. Matt Miskin, I think he said price up, yield down on bonds.
Yep.
With John Hancock of Boston. John Hancock, investment management. Churn to the market. The VIX from 12 up to 13.47. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. We are waiting to hear from the Supreme Court later this morning as the justices prepare to hand down more major decisions. Bloomberg's Amy Morris has a preview.
The justices handed down 4 decisions yesterday, leaving 19 more rulings to issue before the court is expected to recess at the end of the month. Now, among them, a ruling on former President Trump's claim that he is immune from prosecution for alleged crimes committed while in office. And the court is expected to rule on whether states that prohibit social media companies from removing posts based on a political view violate free speech. But there is a lot to do before the court is in recess. So after today, the court has now added this coming Wednesday to hand down more decisions. In Washington, Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
President Joe Biden is beginning debate preparations at Camp David. His trip comes as officials in both parties scramble to set expectations for what may be the most high-stakes presidential debate in decades. Biden's team notes he cannot afford an underwhelming performance against Donald Trump Thursday night. Trump's allies are pushing the Republican to stay focused on his governing plans, but they are expecting him to be tested by pointed questions about his claims of election fraud and his legal issues. The Pentagon acknowledges Ukraine can expand their strikes into Russia using U.S. weapons. It's a significant change in the Biden administration's limited permission to strike into Russia near Kharkiv. Earlier this week, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan indicated that the U.S. agreed to allow Ukraine to fire into Russia wherever Russian forces were attempting to invade Ukraine. Pentagon Press Secretary General Pat Ryder repeated Sullivan's language during Thursday's Pentagon briefing.
The National Security Advisor put it, in great words here in the sense that it's not about geography, it's about common sense, right? Being able to fire back if you're fired upon.
Meanwhile, Ukraine is experiencing rolling blackouts as Russia intensified strikes targeting energy infrastructure over the past 3 months. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
To get your attention, we talk a lot about double degrees. How about engineering and drama?
Oh.
From a small startup university of Canada, the University of Toronto.
Interesting.
Donald Sutherland was extraordinary. And to give you the idea, you think about how large he was, particularly in his Canada. Michael Barr, in the Montreal Expos, he wasn't up in the press box or the corporate boxes. He was down in the 15th row as a fan.
Donald Sutherland, and again, I'm going to go back to, I know people know him from the Hunger Games and this and that.
You're going to go back. Come on.
I'm going to go back to the Dirty Dozen. I'm going to go back to MASH. This man, extraordinaire. And just a giant. And I don't think people realize what we've lost. He passed yesterday.
And what's great about Donald Sutherland was, and somebody had this is not my own idea, a lot of great tributes, he was never bigger than the part. Like in the Dirty Dozen, he played back from the world-class entourage, Lee Marvin, and the rest.
I think even Kelly's Heroes, he was the same thing.
It's a great movie, Kelly's Heroes.
I mean, my complete act is based off Kelly's Heroes. Of course, I watched it with a case of Genesee cream now, but it's different. But, what a gifted actor. And there it is again. Academics leads, engineering and drama.
Gone at 88.
Donald Sutherland. Watch some of his movies, particularly as younger. Mr. Barr, as our movie expert. Kelly's Heroes. Don Rickles and Donald Sutherland, just extraordinary in that movie. Clint Eastwood saves the day as they can. From New York City, stay with us. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got little movement in futures this morning on this last trading day of the week. We'll get to NASDAQ futures down about 19 points at 20,012. We have Dow futures down about 9 points, 39,565, and S&P futures down about 5 points at 5,539. The 2-year yield, 4.70%. That's down 3 basis points. The 10-year yield, 4.23%. That's down 3 basis points. Over to commodities. Spot gold higher, 2,365 an ounce. We have Brent crude, $85 a barrel. WTI crude, $81 a barrel. To earnings we go. We'll start with CarMax, up 1%. First quarter profit stronger than expected, even though its sales missed estimates, with those shares still higher. And we have some news in gaming. Reuters reporting U.S. casino operator Boyd Gaming. It's approached Penn Entertainment about an acquisition. Now, if that happens, it would be the biggest merger among U.S. gambling companies since 2020. We have Penn Entertainment up about 0.5%. And finally, Red Bull already has significant investments in sports teams. Now, sources telling Bloomberg News that the company is considering making a bid for a new NBA basketball team for Las Vegas. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash, Tom and Paul.
Is Las Vegas going to have? They're going to have every sport. I mean, that's the trend.
Yep.
They got Formula One.
Yeah, they get
hockey,
NFL. Baseball's coming.
Baseball's
in a few years
coming.
from the
I mean,
A's.
it's like
so
a new
why not? So
destination
it's a
place.
top market and plenty of revenue there.
30 seconds here on a Friday as we ease into the summer, and it's got that real summer feel off of a 4-day work week. The ocean water of New Jersey. I mean, it's not like down south where they're really worried about hurricanes and all that.
10 days ago, we were trending nicely. We were about 64 degrees, a degree or two every week, getting better. And then Lisa Mateo and her family came down a week ago Saturday.
There we go.
And I woke up and it said 58 degrees was the temp, and we've been stuck at 58 degrees since. It's incredible. I don't know what's going on.
It's like Maine.
Freezing.
Gura goes up there.
Yeah, it's like Maine.
I mean, Gura, you know, Lisa, you're there, like, you know, Gura's up in Maine with a 6-pack of Narragansett.
Yep.
He's got his children spraining their ankles on the damn rocks.
Oh, gosh.
And the water temperature is 54 degrees, and he's like everybody in the pool.
Exactly. But, Lisa, I have to tell you here, Morrison Essex line on Twitter 7 minutes ago, suspended.
No.
Yes.
Okay.
So I don't know what we're
doing.
So you're going to go to Hoboken and go from there.
I probably have to go back to
So
Hoboken.
this is trains?
Yeah, it's again.
It's a mess, day after day.
And guess what, Tom? July 1st, fares go up 15%. So
okay.
Perfect timing.
Does Tucker know this? Okay.
Yeah.
No, okay.
No, Tucker's got his own issue.
Let's get to the newspapers.
Now, a look at the front pages. What's making news around the world? Your daily roundup of today's headlines from major publications.
The Lisa Mateo Report, the front page, is brought to you by IBKR. Financial advisors switch to Interactive Brokers for lowest cost. Global trading and turnkey custody solutions. No ticket charges, no conflicts of your interest. At IBKR.com/RIA. One more time, IBKR.com/RIA. Lisa, what do you have?
All right, we know what we're talking about missing out on that NVIDIA stock, right? The big pick.
Yeah, tell me.
So SoftBank CEO Masayoshi Son, he's known for some of the most successful investments in technology history, but he made that mistake, okay? At the company's shareholder meeting, he's talked about missing out on $150 billion after selling NVIDIA shares in 2019. Okay, so you have the breakdown. It was SoftBank's Vision Fund. They sold an entire 4.9 stake in NVIDIA. They booked a $3.3 billion return on the investment, so it seemed like a good thing because they spent about $700 million for the stake. But if he had held on to that NVIDIA stake, it would be worth around $160 billion today.
There will be a biography. Lionel Barber, who's rode the FT for years, Lionel Barber, out with a one volume, I think it's the beginning of the year, Gambling Man, The Secret Story of Masayoshi Son. I don't have a really informed opinion.
Some big winners and some big losers.
That's collegial. You nailed that.
A big stake in ARM and Alibaba, so that's not too bad.
Okay, what else next?
But he missed the train.
Yep.
Okay, Taylor Swift economy has landed in Europe, Tom. Yes. The European summer tour has kicked off today. Actually, she's performing the first of 8 shows at London's Wembley Stadium. 700,000 people.
8 shows at Wembley. Holy
700,000 people expected to see that show.
Are they all Americans?
So that's the thing. A lot of Americans flying in, spending money. Airport, hotels, restaurants, you name it, spending money down there.
All right.
So
there's a photo there. Mohammed's sitting next to Stephanie Ruhle of MSNBC.
I saw that.
I'm like, what is this like?
Exactly.
Liz Ann Saunders is like 3 rows over. Come on, continue.
But they're saying it could put a strain on inflation because when she comes in, everybody raises the prices, and for the hotels and for the restaurants, everything.
The economic input has got to be just extraordinary.
It keeps going. It keeps going.
It is just, I haven't seen anything like it. Again, it feels, Tom, and I'll defer to you, it feels like Beatlemania, just that whole, I haven't felt anything or sensed anything like since Beatlemania.
Yeah, I'll go with that. I'll go with that. I will say there's a lot of talk about she's put out too much product, and the new album just is not the magic that we saw with Antonoff and the National in the pandemic. And, there's an ebb and flow that happens to any artist. Right. And I'm going to cut her some major slack on that. But is there an opening act?
That's a good question. I don't know.
I don't know.
That would be a good gig, though.
That would be a good gig.
That's getting you some
so.
notoriety there.
Next.
Okay, this one. Okay. It turns out men aren't the only one to benefit from Viagra. A lot of doctors prescribing it for women.
What?
Okay, this is in the New York Times.
What's Viagra?
I'm treading very carefully here, okay? But there's a lot of research. It shows how the drugs affect female arousal. It's limited. There's not much research on it, okay? But the doctor's been prescribing these pills and creams anyway. Telehealth companies are coming out with them. Pharmaceutical companies looking for FDA approval for different kinds to market specifically to women. Is it worth it, though? Okay, so the experts are saying, stick with me here, physical arousal in women similar to erectile dysfunction because it has to do with blood flow. Okay, that's as far as I'm going. But it's not a solution for everybody. There it is. It's out there. Studies show mixed results. Either way, the doctors are prescribing it for women.
Why not?
There you go. I'm telling you, the New York Times has it there.
All right, we'll go with it. If it's good for men, why not women?
That's borderline. I don't know if we can say all that.
But we did. So there you go. Okay, since we're heating things up, all right, so finally the new Bugatti. It's the hybrid. It has a powerful price tag, $4.1 million.
For a car.
Yes, it is called the Tourbillon, okay, because it is the French word for whirlwind. You get a lot with it. You get the V16 powertrain, 2 electric motors, one in the front, one by the rear axle, 1,800 horsepower hybrid power plant, speeds of 276 miles per hour. You have to check it on the terminal. It's a great article. The pictures are amazing.
What's amazing?
I mean, Matt Miller's going to pull up on one of those any day now. I know.
Can totally see him.
Katy Kaminski's getting ready to come on here, and she's setting up. You're talking about the damn Bugatti. She's such a hitter. She's taking notes. She's going to be down at the local Bugatti dealer in Cambridge, Mass.
Checking it out.
I tell you, it looks like a spaceship.
And here's the best part about it. It has this screen that pops out of the center, and guess what that screen has on it? Apple CarPlay. Bam.
Are you kidding? Apple CarPlay's in the Bugatti. We love the Bugatti. All I can say, folks, that we get the numbers. We are humbled worldwide by what Apple CarPlay has done. Just no question about it. Is that the last one, or would you like to go back to medicine?
No.
And Hannah Elliott, again, who has one of the best jobs in Bloomberg, she's the one that wrote this article, and she gets to check out all these really cool cars.
She gets to ride it.
And I mean, a Bugatti. I mean, Miller would get it in the atrium here at our world headquarters, and he'd drive around in it.
And Hannah just got married this past week.
No kidding.
Yep.
Good
Very
for
good.
her.
Right.
She travels around a lot.
Matt Miller cares. He was there, Rich.
Matt's working on a new project.
He's got a lot going on, man. He's got a lot going on. He's got some
He's
podcasts.
never been up this early. He usually slides in at 10 or 11.
Yeah, exactly. All right, I'll check out this Bugatti. Do you think I can get a test drive? Just go out to my Bugatti dealership?
Miller will.
Yeah.
I wonder what the insurance on that.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. No, that's exactly it. Futures deteriorate ever so slightly. Futures negative 10. Into your weekend. Stay cool. The heat wave abs. Rob Carolyn with us in 60 minutes. Stones.
Under my thumb, Siamese cat of a girl. Under my thumb, she's the sweetest
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
We're addicted to the parlor game, the Fed, the monetary ballet.
Where do you see opportunities in that fixed income space here in 24?
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
AI affecting demand for cloud computing.
And Michael Barr with news.
Another legal setback for Donald Trump, this time across the pond.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, Lisa Mateo, Michael Barr. Eventful Friday. Thought it'd be sleepy. I was wrong. Bond market moves. Bond prices up. Yield down. Come back a little bit right now, but nevertheless, critical points for yield. We heard in the last hour a prediction of yields lower from Matt Miskin at John Hancock. It's really critical. And Paul, to go to the oddities of the housing market, which is basically fractured, the mortgage is starting to come in.
Yeah, mortgage rates coming down just a little bit here, get below that 7% number. We got existing home sales coming up at 10 a.m. Alex Steele and me will bring that
Today
to you.
we
We
do.
got some PMIs coming out here at 9:45, Tom. So we'll break those when they happen.
Look at that, economic data on a Friday.
Yeah, why not?
I'm learning from Sweeney every day, and the PMIs, that's critical as well. Futures -3 now, -10, a little deterioration in the VIX. Getting out to a 14 level, a little Friday angst is what I'm going to call it. Bloomberg Surveillance, we're brought to you by Cohn-Resnick Advisory, Assurance Tax. They're industry advisors. They can customize solutions to help your business create value and increase resilience. Visit cohnresnick.com/advisory. Cohn-Resnick, COHNREZNICK, cohnresnick.com/advisory. We thank them for their support. With a Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
You got it. We have futures. Well, they're slightly lower, and this has had a triple witching derivatives expiration day today. NASDAQ futures and S&P futures both down about 0.1%. We have Dow futures. They are little change, down about 21 points. We'll head over to the 2-year yield at 4.69%. That's down 3 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.23%, down 3 basis points. Today, a few things. We get a read on existing home sales. We also get the Conference Board issuing their index of leading economic indicators for May. Huawei's competition with Apple in the Chinese market, that is heating up. The U.S. sanctioned company says it's closing in on 1 billion active consumer devices. Apple shares right now, they're up about 0.4%. Meanwhile, sources say China pushing for Visa and MasterCard to lower their bank card transaction fees in the country. It's part of an effort to make payments easier for foreign visitors. And finally, CDK Global, you've been hearing about them, and now says it was hit by back-to-back cyber attacks, and it may be several days before a lot of those car dealers who use their software are back online. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. With bulletproof engineering, Katy Kaminski joins AlphaSimplex right now on trend. Double E, and also, as Paul mentioned, operational research out of a school in the Charles River in Boston. Katy, we could go for 3 hours this morning, but just basically, have we reversed to finally trend in place, higher fixed income prices and lower yield? Is that trend in place?
So we're in the process of pivoting. The signals have been switching more to long, particularly in international fixed income. But I'd say that you're still seeing a little bit of residual signal short in fixed income for the U.S. because of the recent moves not being enough relative to long-term trends. So it definitely feels like an inflection point this month.
The general rule I get, thanks to Zero Hedge for great work on this every week, is on a Friday they sort of assess the bet that's out there. It seems to me that retail is betting America, big cap, large cap, NVIDIA, blah, blah, blah. And hedge funds are maybe not on that page. They're on a different page. What is the bet right now that you observe in the CTA community?
So right now, it's been interesting because this year, most of the year, it's been a hedged bet in the sense that you've seen long equity signals. That's been one of the best momentum plays this year till now. But you've also seen some changes in the commodity sector. So the copper trade, the positioning in gold, a lot of commodities has been long, but has been dissipating. And then this month, you've seen suddenly now energy is moving upwards again. So there's this disjoint in the commodity sector. Fixed income has been short most of the year, except for now recently, you're starting to see that pivot. The US dollar, again, a tricky one, has now been rallying again. We can talk about that. But in general, it does feel a little bit like a pivot or an inflection for current trends into what could be the trend going in the second half of the year.
So, I mean, broadly speaking, Katy, the folks you talk to, is it a risk-on environment? Do I want to be long stocks, bonds, things like that? Or are people just too concerned here about where the global economy is going?
So this is a very good question, because before June, my answer would be, yeah, it's pretty risk on, with the exception of short fixed income positioning. But this month, we have seen several synchronous sell-off periods for some of the prevailing trends, and we've seen some consistent risk-off days, meaning that people are running to bonds when things are looking bad. And I think this is an indication that they're actually starting to get concerned about some of the weaker data, particularly on the economic side. And so to me, it feels like sentiment has shifted some in the markets, and the signals are adjusting to that.
So in the fixed income market, Katy, do you want to just, I don't know, sit in a 2-year treasury and get close to 5% yield, or do you want to take some credit risk on here? And if so, where?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I think a lot of, in terms of the credit space, is not something we are focused on, but what you have seen is that, there is this trade-off between locking in that higher yield if you do think that rates are going to come down. So I think a lot of investors are also considering that, like, could this be the moment if things do calm down? And so if you're seeing a significant enough spread in a credit product, that may make sense. But of course, there's always this issue that if we do actually see a longer time to get lower rates, there's substantial volatility around the bond positioning in general right now.
Should we go double E on her?
Sure.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, for the first time ever on Bloomberg Surveillance, Brownian motion and drift function with Katy Kaminski. Katy, I look at BitDog and I can't find a legitimate time series. This is Hamilton, folks, out of University of California, San Diego. It doesn't drift within a random sense like most time series. Can you get actual time series motion out of Bitcoin?
Well, I mean, I think so, because Bitcoin just has way more volatility. So I think you just got to have a different input function to that drift process. And notoriously, it's difficult to estimate the mean of a Brownian motion. It's easier to estimate the vol. So I'd say that, you can definitely be sure that you're going to have much higher volatility in those type of assets.
Right.
Not to mention the fact we don't have as much data that haven't been around.
Exactly. Is it maturing, though? And on the Kaminski MIT timeline, when does Bitcoin start to drift like Microsoft or Sweeney Amalgamated, the metal company out in New Jersey?
Well, I think that's what, initially people like to think that something is so different, and it's not. It's different from everything else. And I think that Bitcoin has really shown, as an asset, it's just a highly volatile asset, but it does have drift, and it does behave in some sense less like a risk-off asset,
right,
less uncorrelated to stock markets than anything else. So people thought, oh, this is totally different. It's an uncorrelated process, but it actually does have a lot of inputs to people's demand, because who's buying it? People need to buy it, therefore it's still connected to the general economy.
Was this too much for Friday?
Way too much
Way
for
too
summer
much.
Friday.
Katy Kaminski, go away. With AlphaSimplex there, a Brownian motion and BitDog. I love that. I mean, frame that right there. Katy Kaminski, just truly outstanding. Well, I'm not going to do it today. We'll talk about Bitcoin. It's maturing.
I guess.
It's maturing. The time series is getting a little better. Futures deteriorate, -3 now, -10. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. A heat wave is moving closer to the breaking point from the Midwest to New England, but there is no immediate relief in sight for much of the rest of the country. The National Weather Service says the heat and humidity could send the heat index readings above 100 degrees in many locations, possibly breaking all-time records. Here's Bloomberg meteorologist Rob Carolyn.
Well, the worst of it's going to be the Ohio River Valley and into the northern mid-Atlantic states, the New York City area and western New England. That's where we'll see temperatures again today above 90. You factor in dew points above 70, and it's going to feel like it's 100 to 110 in that region today.
Bloomberg meteorologist Rob Carolyn. The Supreme Court will deliver more opinions this morning with a large caseload and time running out. At least 17 cases are still left to come down in the Supreme Court, with more than half of those of major political and social significance. Eileen Cannon, the federal judge presiding over the classified documents case against former President Donald Trump, is hearing arguments today on the defense's effort to get the indictment thrown out on grounds that the prosecutor who brought the charges was illegally appointed. The arguments over the legality of special counsel Jack Smith's appointment kick off a 3-day hearing that is set to continue next week. ByteDance's TikTok has gone to court to challenge the U.S. forced divestiture legislation. Bloomberg's Ed Maxter has the story.
In the filing, the company says it has a negotiated 90-page national security agreement signed with the U.S. government to offer multi-layered safeguards and enforcement mechanisms, but says Congress disregarded the agreement and the groundwork when considering the ban. The Justice Department then issued a statement saying that the legislation addresses critical national security concerns in a manner that is consistent with the First Amendment and other constitutional limitations, and says that it will defend the legislation in court. Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Radio.
Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom Paul.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. It takes like 40 people to make this go, folks. Trust me, I'm working and I've got this in my head. Paul, I've completely dropped the ball on the crescendo in Warner Brothers Discovery.
Oh, boy.
And always constructive. They fired the general counsel of Paramount yesterday.
Sure, why not?
After 12 years there with Viacom.
Yep.
Krista, you got to believe she's got encyclopedic knowledge of all of the relations of Paramount. Paul, it's into this weekend. Should Warner Brothers merge with Paramount?
Two really struggling companies here. Traditional legacy media companies. You don't know what to do with them in a streaming world. Investors don't know what to do with them. Unfortunately, both companies have a lot of debt on their balance sheet at just a time when they can't really afford it. So both are really struggling. Paramount would sell itself if any bidder would give them a credible bid there. Warner Brothers Discovery, we don't know. I think John Lone probably has some thoughts there on Warner Brothers Discovery, but again, two companies just struggling to find their places in this new world.
From the last hope for Warner Brothers of February-ish a year ago, it's down 57%.
Yep.
And I'm sorry, the last 2 weeks have just been brutal.
Yeah.
There's no other industry I know like this.
No, and it's amazing. I mean, the auto industry a little bit trying to figure out what to do with electrification is an issue. But the thing about the auto industry, they're still making money hand over fist with their traditional business. Here at the entertainment business, they're seeing their profitability of their core business that they took 50, 60, 75 years to build up is just literally melting like an ice cube.
I want to come back on the auto business because I think basically they're a bank having to make cars. Seems to be the traditional way. Just to point out, Paramount and Warner Brothers Discovery, just a very difficult 3, 4, 5 days. Futures at -11 Dow, futures -31. The VIX, it's like got that Friday feel. Friday on my mind, 13.61 on the VIX. We're watching yield Brent, $86. Bloomberg surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures still in the red, and this is as the AI rally shows some signs of slowing. This after strategists at Bank of America say inflows into tech funds reached a weekly record of $8.7 billion. So right now we have NASDAQ futures down about 0.2%. Same for S&P futures, Dow futures. They are little changed. We have the 2-year yield at 4.69%, down 4 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.22%, down 3 basis points. Now we talked about inflows into tech funds, so let's stick with tech. We'll talk about shares of NVIDIA. Lower before the bell, down nearly 2%. And this is after CEO Jensen Huang unloaded almost $32 million of shares in the company. What's moving the markets? We'll start with drug company Sarepta Therapeutics, up 37%. This is after its gene therapy received expanded FDA approval. And Gilead Sciences, they're extending Thursday's gains. Those shares higher too. And this is after promising interim results from a trial of the firm's drug lenacapavir. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thank you so much, Lisa Mateo. The heat wave's pulling back. Rob Carolyn's going to be with us 45 minutes. There are some questions about pockets of 90 and 100 degrees. There are questions about, Paul, the duration of the heat. I think is, to me, the big thing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not like 3-4 days anymore. It's like 6, 7, 8 days.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it's going to be a quick thing. And we'll see when it starts to get down into the subway system. It usually takes a couple of days, and I think today's going to be the day.
Sweeney, seeing if the Sikorsky can get off now that it's a little bit
I don't know how I'm going to get off this island today.
Cooler. On the equity markets, Eric Friedman joins CIO, U.S. Bank Asset Management. Eric, what temperature your skinny Atlas up in the gorgeous Finger Lakes near Cooperstown? Eric Friedman, what did Skinny Atlas get up to?
I think Skinny Atlas will probably get into the low 90s, Tom. It's a great day to sit in the middle of the lake and just enjoy the rays. That's what you do on days like today.
Sit under the veranda and read Mark Twain, maybe, is how you get it, or Fenimore Cooper. How are you going to write a June 30th epistle for U.S. Bank? What is going to be the Friedman message, June 30?
The message is going to be have a working thesis, but not be too stubborn if you're wrong. And I think that's the environment that we're in. It's always how it works in capital markets, Tom and Paul. And I think that as we get deeper into this year, if you're not willing to be flexible mentally, and again, not get over your skis with being too technical or being too tactical, but just recognize that there are some variables out there that they're the known knowns, if you will, but there are also plenty of things out there that are obviously unknown knowns. So, our position has been be overweight risk assets. That's helped. We've also taken on a position in commodities, which we think gives us a bit of a call option into some likely inflationary policies in the back half of this year. But we have to be flexible, and that's the way we approach things.
So, Eric, the commodity call got my attention there. Where in commodities do you see opportunities?
Probably the biggest thing we're doing, Paul, is not to isolate things like oil or gold specifically, but actually own the broad basket. Again, your namesake Bloomberg Commodity Index is actually our favorite index in this environment. You get a decent slug of gold, about 15%. You also have a lot of petrochemicals and hydrocarbons in the mix. So that's a space that, right now, technically speaking, is in a level of no man's land. We saw a nice breakout higher. It's consolidated. It's kind of choppy, if you will. So we're looking for direction one way or the other, but we think owning a broader basket versus being more targeted in MLPs or oil companies specifically is the right way to approach the category.
So on the equities front, are we just long the big cap tech names, or are we trying to get a little bit more creative than that?
Yeah, I think this is a time where, our approach has been to think about the more equal weighted S&P has been our favorite tactical overweight, where really neutral the AI theme. We're neutral a lot of the sub consumer discretionary context, if you will. But this is a time that we think small caps, there's a great segment you had earlier talking about some of the risk of not just unprofitability in small caps, but also refinancing risk. People don't normally think about that with small cap companies that, they're just equity capitalized. They're not. They actually have a bunch of debt as well. And their interest charges are a bit more hefty in this environment than perhaps large cap companies. So we think that equal weighted index, which is not done particularly great versus the regular S&P, that's a spot where you're still getting that large cap exposure. You have less refinancing risk. You have a lot of profitability on your side. That's where we're really emphasizing portfolios right now.
CFA Level 2, Eric Friedman. There's the acclaimed Friedman Exotic exuberance index. What is our exuberance into the early summer? What do you see from U.S. bank clients? Are they more risk prone to take on NVIDIA than you guys, or are they still cautious?
I think the biggest component that we see, Tom, is still, it's almost a barbell. The clients who really love being in cash, not in all their portfolio. Again, we do a good job of counseling them out of that, but still emphasizing the front end of the yield curve. That would be the first level of concentration. We've, again, emphasized there are a lot of great things to do in diversified income in this current environment, things like reinsurance, non-agency mortgages, things like high yield munis. There's a lot of things that can provide some cash flow beyond sitting in the front of the curve. The other thing is, to your point, domestic large cap tech. And again, our viewpoint has been, don't bet against it, don't be underweight, be at least neutral, have some exposure. CapEx is continuing. So we're seeing both ends of the spectrum. FOMO of, hey, I want to keep these high yields in my account, if you will, and then also I want to participate in some of the aging tech rally. Those are the things that we're seeing most consistently.
So I'm taking from your comments there, Eric, that you guys are all in on this AI trend, I guess, within technology in the broader market.
Yeah, Paul, I'd say that we have been all in, and I don't say that, as a Monday morning quarterback looking at what's already done well, but we have been overweight tech structurally in portfolios. That's really helped. We do think that this is a good time to trim, again, not get below market weight. That's been our approach. And really the barometer for us is the idea that corporate CapEx tells the story. So we don't only look at valuation, we don't only listen to earnings calls, we actually look to see in the periphery, is the spend there? And what we're seeing is consistently that it's not just the original 4 or 5 companies that were lined up at certain gates to buy big ships, but it's also spreading out across other industries and across other categories. So we think that it is a sustainable trend, but we're not going to again just navel gaze as the market goes higher. This is a good time to trim and get back to market weight.
Navel gaze is CFA level 1.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, navel gaze.
Hey, Eric, this is an election year here. How does that figure into your calculus, if at all?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, Paul, for us is our commodity position is what we're using as that proverbial call option. If Democrats win, if they have a larger presence in government, likely you'll see some more spending-based policies, which we think are inflationary. If Republicans win, we think there's a potential for strong tax cuts and lower tax rates, also potentially inflationary. The last thing I'll say is this: China remains a little bit of an under-the-radar story with respect to the overall election. It's obviously a popular rally point for both parties to be anti-China. China is also losing its property market, which is not new news, but that deceleration of prices is actually happening more rapidly than China would want. So we also think that there's a bias in China to potentially buy more goods and also be inflationary. So those are the sorts of things, again, back to that working thesis, that working hypothesis mantra we have. We think that's going to be what plays out, but if we're wrong, we have to be smart with stops and take out positions if the market says we're wrong.
Eric Friedman, thank you so much with the U.S. Bank. Huge turnout. Thank you out in live chat. Sweeney dressed summer-like.
Yep.
Mateo dressed summer-like. I've got on my Ripley
tan
suit.
The
it's
tan,
a tan
classics summer tan suit.
John Farrow's favorite suit. And, people said this week, where's Farrow? And I said, he goes to Muff. He's like Ripley.
Yep.
He goes to a Tronny. You know, it's all there is.
Well, he's a player.
To it. He's in Capri somewhere. I know. He's on some boat I can't afford. That's what I know. And now, folks, we go to Sweeney and the Sikorsky. There's the headline. Thank you, Brandon.
I put a ticket in for the Sikorsky. We'll see if I get it. I don't know how I'm getting off this island. New Jersey Transit rail service has been suspended again for trains going in and out of New York's Penn Station. The operator said in a post on X that unspecified issues, we don't know what's going on, with overhead wires owned by Amtrak, they point out, were causing the disruption. This is the third time this week.
And the third time, when's the fare go up?
It goes up July 1st.
July 1st.
Yes. So, but anyway, so we're going
Very
to
good.
get our way to Hoboken, and then we'll see where we go.
Yeah, that's good. Good morning, Tom Porcelli over at PGIM. He's got the Hinckley picnic boat. Maybe you can get
take me down
get
the Hudson.
Paul across the river and down the Hudson as well. Please stay cool where you are. It's an Act Friday. Bloomberg surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures still in the red. This is after we had some more Fed speak. We have Minneapolis Fed President Neil Kashkari, who said inflation on the way back down to 2%, but getting there, well, it's going to take some time. Right now, NASDAQ futures down 0.2%. Same for S&P futures. Dow futures down about 0.1%. We have the 2-year yield at 4.69%. That's down 3 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.23%, and that's down 3 basis points. Over to commodities, we have spot gold higher, $2,363 an ounce. Brent crude $85 a barrel. WTI crude $81 a barrel. We have shares of Spirit Aerosystems. They're up about 4%. There's a report from Reuters that Boeing is nearing a deal to buy back the aircraft parts supplier. We have Boeing shares down about 0.5%. Smith & Wesson, their shares down more than 4%. The company said sales in its first quarter, it would be about 10% lower year over year. And finally, CarMax up 1%. First quarter profit stronger than expected, even though sales missed estimates. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much. Appreciate that right now. Economic data, 8:30. It's a Friday, but Paul Sweeney and Alex Steele will have some important economic data for you near the 10 o'clock hour, particularly existing home sales, which I know Paul follows. Wicked close. I mean, you know, I'm sorry, an existing home is not a new home, is it?
That's right. So and nobody's putting their homes on the market because then they have to go out and buy a new home with a much higher mortgage.
What are you seeing where you live? Is it like a frenzy of all cash?
Yeah.
NVIDIA?
Yeah, absolutely. Still.
I got NVIDIA. Let's buy some acreage out by John Tucker.
Yep, exactly right.
It's as simple as
simple
that.
as that.
Economic indicators, of course, are brought to you by Commonwealth, supporting more than 2,000 independent financial advisors with a 2-to-1 advisor to staff ratio, small firm attentiveness, big advisor impact. Go to commonwealth.com to learn about their consultative support and technology. And we thank Commonwealth for all of our economic coverage, of course, with Michael McKee. And just to look ahead here into the end of the month, there's like 4 million economic datas next week. It's a very big Commonwealth end of the month.
It's good to be an economist next week. You'd be fully employed.
Yeah, like Lindsay Piegza. It's great.
Exactly.
Joining us now with Futures -9.
On the one hand.
Lindsay Piegza. Lindsay, I've been dying to talk to you. You're one of the people that have said higher for longer, or at least it's going to be a struggle. How do you color rates coming in now? Do you have to adjust to disinflation and lower rates?
Well, I think we have seen some progress. We've seen some improvement in inflation, both in terms of the CPI and the PPI, but with the nominal rates of both of those indicators still above January levels and the pace of disinflation still painfully slow, I think investors are more apt to look at 1 month data as an indication that we are on a sustainable downward trend, as opposed to Fed members, policymakers, which have said the bar is much higher than 1 month data. They need to see many months of improving data. So I think the Fed is still in a position on the sidelines, maintaining that message of higher for longer, even if the market begins to push against committee members.
All right. So what's the feeling here about inflation? Is there anything different in this inflationary environment in terms of that last, 100 basis points or so that might be different from past cycles? I mean, is 2% even a number that we should be, gaming for?
Well, I think when we look historically at cycles, the last mile, the last 100 basis points is always the most difficult. So this is not the appropriate time for the Fed to lose focus on achieving price stability. That being said, this environment is somewhat different because we have seen this increasingly bumpy, increasingly volatile environment of inflation. Remember, since the start of the year, or I should say at the start of the year, inflation gave us a sizable head fake, moving away from that 2% target for several months. So only now, as we see April giving us minimal improvement, followed by a more sizable improvement in May, have we started to regain that downward descent. So it's still quite a bit of pathway for the Fed to continue along before we see that 2% target achieved on a sustained basis. Remember, it's not about touching 2% briefly, but getting back to that target and maintaining that level. Now, if you want to question the 2% objective of the Fed, it has to be done after this rate cycle. Once price stability is achieved, the Fed could go back and look and say, maybe that was too difficult for the economy to withstand.
Right.
Maybe we should be more flexible in our inflation target. But they cannot do it at this stage. At this stage, if they start to communicate that they will tolerate an above 2% level, that could risk unhinging inflation expectations and potentially undo the progress that they've already made.
Lindsay, V.V. Clark started us out this morning at Citigroup, and they made very clear their belief is this is a Greenspanian measured Fed. Do you agree, and I see this with the silliness of no dissents, that the process of the Fed will be much more towards a measured approach once they go?
Oh, absolutely. That's a very important point, because even after the Fed opens that door to the first rate reduction, and again, we can debate whether or not that's a 2025 event or December of this year, but even after they open the door, the market is going to assume that that implies an ongoing reduction in rates every quarter, every meeting. The Fed, however, is likely to take a much more controlled and tempered pace. Maybe we only see 25, 50 basis points, followed by a second round prolonged pause on the sideline. The Fed is talking about slowing the pace of restriction, getting us closer to neutral as we move forward. But there's no rush to get back to neutral, and certainly no expectation among the committee members at this point to begin to think about falling below neutral or beginning to provide accommodation to the economy. So that's also going to be the second part of the equation that the market and investors are going to have to push against the Fed in an expedited pathway back down towards neutral or further back towards those zero interest rates that we were so used to for so many years.
Lindsay, talk to us about the labor market here. I know that's another component for the Fed to kind of view here. We're at around 4% unemployment. How do you think the Fed is viewing the labor market here?
Well, I think the Fed is a bit baffled, because when we talk about the fastest acceleration in rates and this relatively elevated nominal level of policy, the overall broader impact on the consumer, on the labor market, on top line activity, the retarding factor has been relatively muted. And so this continues to perpetuate the Fed's desire for achieving that utopic soft landing. But I think it also calls into question the Fed's terminal rate decision, whether or not 5.5 was sufficiently restrictive, or with a hyper focus on achieving that utopic soft landing, did they stop short of the level needed to not just hope, but ensure a return back to price stability?
I got to put a bow on this, Lindsay Piegza with Stifel, and the answer is she's been hugely outlier and hugely courageous. She's made a huge splash this year, folks. Let's get this on record, Lindsay. When do they cut, and how many times do they cut into 2025?
I think given the fact that inflation and the economy has failed to perform as expected, I think the next move will be to the downside, will be a rate cut eventually, but eventually does increasingly appear to be a 2025 event.
So
and
you're saying there may be, wait,
most,
that's too important. Come on, Lindsay. You're saying your call is no rate cut this year?
That's correct. That's correct. The Fed has set the bar relatively high for a rate reduction, calling for many months of improvement. And with less than half a year left, and arguably the base effect from 2023 likely filtering out, even if we see a reduced level on a monthly basis, the annual pace is likely to remain elevated, or even worse, push higher towards the end of the year.
Wow.
So I don't see an improving pathway to give the Fed the needed room or justification to provide that first round rate cut. So that pushes us into 2025 for the first reduction.
Okay. Lindsay Piegza, thank you so much. Really, really fascinating. We get all different opinions here on surveillance. We now go to Paul Sweeney, to find out if the truth matters. I feel like Perry Mason. Amtrak, resumption of service to Paul Sweeney's neighborhood, 12 p.m. Now, how do you interpret that? Like, hope and a prayer?
Yeah, I'm not putting any stock in that whatsoever. So here's the new plan for getting back to the shore. Probably taking the subway to 33rd Street, get the PATH train at 33rd Street, take it over to Hoboken. Then once I'm across the river
Right in the water.
Jersey, I'm going to just pull out the old Redo Amex.
Got to.
Get an Uber all the way
to.
down to the shore.
Yeah.
And I'll beg for forgiveness later.
Well, you're huge. You know,
That's how it's going to work.
Redo,
I'll see if I can find some like-minded friends at the Hoboken station, maybe share the fare. But we'll get there. We'll get there. But I mean, it's Amtrak. They got a lot of work to do there.
I don't know. It's 2-3 days in a row. In New York City, folks, Tri-City area, this stuff is serious, including up to Connecticut. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
All I know is that Outback Subaru's looking mighty fine
exactly
right now. The first debate is now less than a week away for President Biden and former President Trump. Bloomberg government's Zach Cohen has more on what to watch from the CNN debate.
Biden will obviously have to make the case that his administration has made gains in trying to curb inflation and overall costs of goods and services that have increased over the course of his tenure, and to make the case that he is not too old to continue doing this job, something that ranks as a severe issue for his reelection campaign. Trump, on the other hand, will have to make the case that he's got a plan for a second administration that would alleviate any concerns from his first, including these felony convictions, to make the case that that should not be an impediment to his taking public office again.
Bloomberg government Zach Cohen, and you can listen to the CNN debate on Bloomberg Radio or watch it on Bloomberg TV beginning this Thursday night at 9 p.m. Wall Street time. Wildfires have destroyed hundreds of buildings in New Mexico. These people were among many who had to flee their homes.
Thank God we're safe and we have somewhere. There's a lot of people that don't have anywhere to go.
President Biden approved a major disaster declaration for the state, sending more federal help for devastated communities. Residents near Oklahoma City feared the worst when a Southwest plane appeared to come dangerously close to their homes. We're learning a Boeing 737, which took off from Las Vegas Tuesday night, was descending into Oklahoma City's airport just after midnight when it dropped as low as 525 feet over the city of Yukon, passing just over a high school. The plane landed safely, but local residents flooded social media. The FAA is investigating. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
We thank David Rubenstein, owner of the Baltimore Orioles, for attendance this week.
Yes.
May we note, going back, Orioles Braves, Orioles take the series, Orioles Phillies, Orioles take the series, Orioles Yankees, Orioles take the series. There seems to be a trend here.
There is. The Orioles, I mean, and they've built it the old-fashioned way, just bringing young talent up and nurturing that talent and keeping some of the young talent once they become good and not trading them away like they historically have done. So they took 2 out of 3 out of the Yankees.
What do you think, Michael? I mean, it's like back when they had 4 pitchers, all won 20 games or whatever, Palmer. And,
well, you want to see Lisa Mateo, see her nostrils flare. Last night's score. Yeah. Orioles 17, Yankees 5.
Yep.
We call that a snot club.
That's a pitcher.
We call that.
Yeah, the Yankees threw out like an outfielder to pitch the last inning, and
Did they?
Yeah.
They still do that.
Yeah.
A catcher?
Catcher?
Thank you, Rich.
Yeah. I mean, he's throwing like batting practice.
You're still allowed to do that.
I think so. Yeah. I mean,
Jose Canseco did that.
Every team has like
never
20 pitchers on, but it's still not enough. So. Anyway, so
it's exciting.
Yeah, the O's, as they say, the O's.
Red Sox at 8-2 the last 10 games.
Nice.
They're like 10 games behind. You can extrapolate that out into August. They'll be 20.
Mets playing better.
3 games behind.
For our Met fans out there.
But it's exciting to see it. We're scheduled. I think the entire team are going to Camden Yards. Good morning, David.
Sure. Yeah. We'll just knock on the suite, and I'm sure he'll love this.
I'm watching a lot of Orioles ball because I get so frustrated with the Red Sox. And Michael Barr, it's just so great to see a homegrown team. Everybody's playing for the big contract because they don't have the big contract. That's all there is.
They look good.
Camden Yards looks as good today as when it opened.
Futures at -6 on a Friday. Bloomberg surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got a little bit of red and green on the screen. So we have NASDAQ futures up just a point right now at 20,032. We have Dow futures down 0.1%, 52 points at 39,523. S&P futures, little change, down about 4 points at 5,540. The 2-year yield, 4.69%. That's down 3 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.22%, and that's down 3 basis points. To commodities, we have spot gold higher at $2,363 an ounce. Brent crude $85 a barrel. WTI crude $81 a barrel. We have Nike reporting earnings this week. Some mixed reviews. One analyst from Williams Trading cutting his price target, telling investors to sell the stock, saying it's too expensive. But meanwhile, you have analysts at Oppenheimer upgraded the stock. Shares of Nike up more than 1%. American Airlines flight attendants could be inching closer to a strike after the latest round of contract talks. Well, it ended without an agreement. Shares of American Airlines little change. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Greatly appreciate it. Paul, let's talk about this. You take the train to the shores of New Jersey across the Hudson River.
Yep.
Why don't you take a ferry?
I could take a ferry, but it drops me off where John Tucker lives in the Highlands area of New Jersey.
It doesn't get you then to the train that gets you.
I need to go another half hour south from there.
Okay.
So I could take the ferry. That's maybe an option I'll explore as we speak, and then maybe just take an Uber from there. That might be the play, Lisa.
That's a nice ride.
All right, let me think about that. Thank you, Tom, for bringing that up.
Did I bring this up?
That helped.
Public
That helped.
service.
That helped. I'm going to take the John Tucker ferry.
Well, okay.
Yeah, and then that'll take me to somewhere in North Jersey, and I'll
We
Uber
love the
from there.
ferry people sponsoring us, and I learned, because we did remotes from there, on the train, no bar car.
Yeah, that is
on the ferry.
Bar car.
Bar car.
Yeah.
Bar boat. Or what, barbell.
That is
whatever.
important.
But that was to me the major distinction that I saw.
Exactly.
Truth, I got seasick.
Yeah.
Truth.
Yeah.
I just, it wasn't bad, but it's so we'll say. I mean, they had to give me Dramamine and all that to get me the vast tides of the Hudson River. This is a wonderful conversation now, and we pause, and I'm going to do my annual lecture. It's summer. You have kids at home. They're in high school. They're bored. They're in college. They're bored. They're out of college. They're bored. You start screaming, Daniel Kurtz-Phelan, Daniel Kurtz-Phelan, and you throw a subscription to Foreign Affairs magazine at them and say they don't get lunch money for the next gin and tonic until they read 2 articles. Joining us from Foreign Affairs, always my read of the summer, Daniel Kurtz-Phelan. Daniel, congratulations on the issue, and you brilliantly frame out Biden and Trump foreign policy with Ben Rhodes and O'Brien of the Trump administration. Tell me the distance between those 2 articles.
Yeah, thanks, Tom, first of all, for the new marketing pitch. I'll send that over to our business side and see what they think. I mean, I think that there are a lot of fascinating things as you read through these 2 articles. You have, I think, Robert O'Brien, who was the last national security advisor in the Trump administration, laying out probably in more detail and more specificity than we've seen from anyone in the Trump camp what a second Trump term would do. And then Ben Rhodes, who was one of the most senior foreign policy advisors to Obama, kind of laying out, I think, a slight difference from the Biden administration, but broadly sympathetic to the administration. And what's kind of fascinating about both of them is they both are kind of reacting to a sense of failures of American foreign policy in preceding decades, though they go in slightly different directions. So you see in Brian, some of the hawkish impulses that you get from Trump at a very high level, in a kind of very abstract way in some sense, with a lot of specificity. So he talks about going back to testing nuclear weapons, something we haven't done actively in a long time, full decoupling with China, and really ramping up pressure there.
Okay, but that's where I wanted to go. Daniel, your claim is still will onto Marshall and our distance from China, and I'm going to say 1948. Nothing's changed, right? These 2 candidates really want a distance from China, right?
That's exactly right. And just to flag one other thing in the issue, Tom, we had talked in the past about an essay we ran by Matt Pottinger, who was the kind of chief China hand in the Trump administration, and Matt Gallagher, former Republican congressman who ran the China subcommittee, laying out a really hardline policy, hardline strategy against China that called for really weakening the Chinese Communist Party. Its regime change has become a dirty word because of its association with Iraq and American foreign policy, but they call for trying to change the nature of power in China. And there's an exchange between Pottinger and Gallagher on the one hand with Rush Doshi, who just left the Biden administration working on China policy. What's really amazing is how much agreement there is. So they split on that question of weakening the regime, but there's a lot more agreement than disagreement, which I think reflects where we are on the China debate.
Daniel, if you're President Biden, you're obviously election year. What are the to-do list for President Biden here in an election year from a geopolitical perspective? You've got China, you've got obviously the Middle East, and you've got Ukraine. What's the strategy here, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a moment where you envy people kind of sitting in the U.S. government trying to manage these three crises. I think what they're trying to do on China, which remains, as we've talked about in the past, the kind of framing the dominant issue for American foreign policy, even with other crises and hot wars going on. I think on China, there's this desire to just keep it as calm as possible through November. So Xi Jinping and Joe Biden met in San Francisco in California last November. And it's not that they settled any of the really deep fissures and tensions in their relationship, but they did basically say, look, let's calm this right now. We both have reasons for doing it. The Chinese economy, as you all know extremely well, is in terrible shape. So there's a mutual interest in not stirring the pot too much at this moment, but it doesn't really solve any of the basic issues. So I think Biden would like to keep that at a low boil, even as he finds some way to get through what are still these kind of frozen terrible status quos in both Gaza and Ukraine. So the Hail Mary in Gaza is of course a Saudi normalization deal that they're still pursuing really aggressively, which what the odds of that are, it's really hard to say. It seems like a long shot to me, but it would really be transformative. Similarly in Ukraine, hoping that the battlefield shifts a bit and things don't look quite as grim as they do right now.
Got to leave it there. Daniel Kurtz-Phelan, thank you so much with Foreign Affairs. I can't say enough about it, folks. Eswar Prasad of Cornell, a good supporter of the show, top dollar. He talks about the resiliency, the dominance of America's currencies. Get a subscription, a print subscription of Foreign Affairs. Kurtz-Phelan, the previous three editors were blind, so the font, you can actually read the font. How quaint is that, folks?
Yes, thank you.
Versus what everybody else is doing nowadays. Foreign Affairs magazine, I can't say, you're not going to read it cover to cover. I'm sorry. You're not going to do that, but you're going to read 2 or 3 articles that make it worth it. I can't say enough. And I should mention that I am a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, so I'm, in a sense, talking my book. Bloomberg surveillance this morning. Brought to you by Interactive Brokers, their bond marketplace. Access their vast selection of over 1 million global fixed income securities. No markups, no built-in spreads, and low, transparent commissions. Learn more at ibkr.com/bonds. Paul, do we have a new Amtrak update?
I'm
12 noon?
Yeah, 12 noon. So here's, all right, thanks to your suggestion, Tom, I'm now Googling first the Sea Streak. I think that's the ferry service.
They were my sponsor.
Okay, very
They were
good.
great.
I'm gonna try that.
No, stop.
Try the ferry.
No. Real fresh cut limes.
Yep. With the
At the bar.
cocktails.
Yes.
Of course,
Sea
no
Street.
question about it. You go in style. So I'll go to East 35th Street on this East River thing. I'm gonna hop on a ferry, and it's gonna take me to John Tucker's, almost his house.
Really?
Yes.
You
And
can
then
stop
from there,
by
maybe
for a
John.
beverage.
Then I'll call John and see if he
Ask
can
him for a ride.
drive me to my
No,
house.
you get the Uber.
Okay,
I mean,
all right, I'll get the Uber then.
You got,
So that's the new plan. We'll see how that goes.
Okay, very good.
We're just all trying to make our way with Amtrak and New Jersey Transit, and commuters around the world know this issue.
To all of you across the nation, there's no one that knows less about New Jersey than me. Lisa and Paul bail my butt out every day. Stevie Ray Vaughan, with the best drummer in the world. Stevie Ray Vaughan, stay cool.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Are these stocks under-owned by institutional Wall Street?
A lot of these companies talking about generative AI.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Investors just worried about the ongoing sales slump in China.
And Michael Barr with news.
A ship traveling through the southern Red Sea has been attacked.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
An eventful Friday, not sleepy as the heat wave ebbs ever so slightly. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, and Lisa Mateo. We're going to get right to it right now. A little lift to the market all of a sudden, a little bit of green in the screen with the NASDAQ at 100. We'll get to some good market talk here in a moment. Let's get right to it. The Bloomberg Business Flash. Lisa Mateo.
And Wall Street may experience some volatility today ahead of triple witching. About $5.5 trillion in stock, index, ETF options all expire today. NASDAQ futures, little change, up about 2 points at 20,034. We have Dow futures, little change, down 13 points at 39,562. And S&P futures, little change, down 3 points at 5,541. The 2-year yield, 4.69%. That's down 3 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.22%, and that's down 3 basis points. Today, we get a read on existing home sales. Also, the Conference Board issues their index of leading economic indicators for May. Huawei's competition with Apple in the Chinese market starting to heat up. The U.S. sanctioned company says it's closing in on 1 billion active consumer devices. Apple shares up about 0.5%. Meanwhile, sources say China pushing for Visa and MasterCard to lower their bank transaction fees in the country to 1.5% from as high as 3%. And if you're in the market for a car, well, CDK Global says it may be several days before the car dealers who use their software are back online thanks to a cyber attack. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much, Lisa. An eventful top of the hour here. We welcome all of you across a parched America. We get an update from Rob Carolyn. He was brilliant the other day, providing a lack of hysteria on the heat wave. It was hot. Where are the danger points, Rob Carolyn, into this Friday and across the weekend?
Well, the danger points today, Tom, are from Connecticut across the Ohio River Valley into southwestern parts of Michigan, northern Indiana. All of those areas today will see temperatures in the 90s with the heat index in excess of 100. The weekend, it shifts a little further south into the northern mid-Atlantic, the West Virginia Panhandle, the D.C. area, Baltimore, and Delaware all look like they're under an excessive heat watch for Saturday. They could have temperatures near 100 Saturday afternoon with the heat index up around 110 or 115.
Are heat events longer now than they used to be?
They are. It's much more difficult these days, Tom, to get temperatures up to 100 degrees because we've gone from having lots of pasture land in the east to lots of forest in the northeast and mid-Atlantic states. So that's dropped the incidence of days where we see it hit 100. But what has changed is we're getting more days where the dew points are getting up into the 70s, and that makes it oppressively humid, which makes the heat index climb above 105. So even though the daytime temperatures aren't reaching 100 very often, as much as they were 100 years ago, the combination of the heat and humidity has turned higher, and that's made it feel more uncomfortable in the last 30 years.
Rob, it seems like, we've experienced these types of heat events, July, maybe even early August, but not necessarily in June. Does this feel a little earlier in the summer season?
It does. And again, it's directly reflected by what took place last winter. Because we were in an El Nino, the jet stream is pushed further north than normal. You don't get a whole lot of Arctic air moving off the East Coast or into the Gulf of Mexico. So both those bodies of water, the Atlantic, the Western Atlantic, the Gulf of Mexico, are very, very warm. And that has allowed high pressure to develop earlier in this season. The Bermuda high stretching from Bermuda all the way into Tennessee this morning. With it in place earlier than normal, it's been able to warm the eastern part of the country up ahead of schedule.
Thanks so much, Rob. Have a good weekend. I can't say enough about the value of Mr. Carolyn, the Bloomberg Radio meteorologist. We're now segue to the heat of Atlanta next week. And here's how important this is. It's a CNN debate, but I read that Fox, and I know that Margaret Brennan will take the debate on their networks. To me, almost unprecedented. Joining us now with her leadership at Face the Nation, Margaret Brennan. Margaret, that's how big this debate is. You're going to pick it up and simulcast it off CNN. How will you treat the debate on Face the Nation on Sunday?
Isn't that incredible? Because this isn't the usual Presidential Debate Commission, this neutral party brokering this. This was a deal CNN cut with the White House and called Donald Trump on his bluff that he wanted to debate. He agreed to all the terms, and now all the networks are taking it. We will be watching it and providing analysis, you're right, on CBS, because there are such high consequences potentially for these two candidates who have failed to enthuse large sections of the American public, the 81-year-old incumbent against the 78-year-old challenger. Can we get them to present an affirmative vision of what they would do for the country in a way that motivates people? Donald Trump said yesterday he doesn't underestimate Joe Biden's abilities as a debater.
3 or 4 days ago, I said, get Brennan on now. Of course we can't, because, Brennan is so large, we're lucky we talked to her on Friday. Margaret, CBS, a dirty little secret, folks, CBS owns polling in television. I'm seeing polls that tell me the president is gaining off of Mr. Trump just in the recent number of days, maybe around the court case and that. Does CBS agree that President Biden goes into this debate with a little bit of momentum?
Well, our polling has shown that it is basically head-to-head, that, in some places Biden has like a 1-point advantage, so within the margin of error. In some of the key battlegrounds, Trump has, advantage 1. So again, right there, they're neck and neck. So I'm going to talk to battleground voters in a focus group we're going to do this Sunday to understand more about what they're thinking. We also have more polling for you. I know you love data on young voters because they will certainly be decisive to a potential Biden win.
Margaret, it seems like this debate is crucial, but it seems like the voting blocks behind President Trump, former President Trump and President Biden are so solid. I'm just not sure where and if there are any folks in the moderate, in between camp that can be swayed by a debate. How do you guys think about that?
No, I think you're right in terms of polarization. And then we get this close and you just see folks cutting deals essentially to say, hey, well, if the writing's on the wall, I got to pick a team. That's the two-party system we're stuck in, right?
Yep.
But in terms of what's at stake here, we have to be able to do our jobs as journalists to make sure that the public, that we are at least telling them what they should be tracking here, because there's such high consequences right now. I have Robert O'Brien, the former national security advisor to then President Donald Trump, on the program this Sunday because he has laid out what a second Trump term would look like on the foreign policy front. And he did it in an essay in Foreign Affairs this week. So we want to press him.
Listen to her. See how she does that? We just got off the phone with Daniel Kurtz-Phelan, Margaret, talking about the Ben Rhodes, Robert O'Brien tandem in Brennan's she's just wired into this show.
Always,
I mean, we should have a debate, Margaret, of Ben Rhodes and Robert O'Brien. That would probably be more valuable than the two presidential candidates.
Well, right. But Ben Rhodes is, I think, not the same kind of Democrat as the Biden advisors right now. So that's the thing. He's been fairly critical of the Biden administration, particularly in their Mideast policy right now. So that also reflects some of the divides we're seeing within the Democratic Party. But I would be fascinated to see that, having known both men. But look, I mean, you talk about, do people watch television? I read foreign affairs. You read foreign affairs. Does the everyday public? No, but it does deserve a follow-up question.
Fired up now.
It does deserve a follow-up question when Robert O'Brien calls for sending the entire Marine Corps to the Pacific right now to deter China. That should get everyone's attention.
It should get their attention. Margaret Brennan, massaging the excesses of our political debate. Watch Face the Nation, the CBS television network. On Sunday, Face the Nation, Sunday, 2 p.m. on Bloomberg Radio in New York, Washington. Bloomberg 1061 Boston, Newburyport as well. Face the Nation this Sunday at 2. You got to start your weekend a little more advanced. And of course, joining us now, it's remote from On the Deck Restaurant in Harbor. Our chief ferry correspondent, John Tucker, joins us right now. Tucker, Amtrak is failing Paul Sweeney here. The level of failure is unknown. It's day after day after day. John Tucker, the ferry experience as you go out to Atlantic Highlands.
I'll tell you, there's nothing like being on vacation and getting a call from Rich Truman. It's an experience like no other. Let's see, Paul.
What do I do?
By the way, I took Amtrak yesterday, home from the nation's capital, where number one son and I were down visiting the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, and the Bill Gross postal exhibit at the Smithsonian, too.
Oh, okay.
The inverted Jennies. It was hot, but coming back, that was an experience on Amtrak because they were having signal problems. The catenary, the overhead lines, they were drooping, so we're at least a couple hours. But we made it. A couple hours late.
Okay, but John,
anyway, Paul,
but in the Hummer H2, are you going to pick up Sweeney in the Hummer and get him home?
If Sweeney agrees to an extravagant dinner,
Yes, exactly.
I have to extract something from him. All right, so let's see. You can take, Paul, I'm going over the schedule right now. You can take the 1:05 p.m. or the 2:45 p.m. from East 35th Street.
Boom.
And you'll be down here in less than an hour. Sit on the deck with a cocktail and a nice breeze. And
All right,
it's
things are
the
picking
only
up.
way to travel.
Things are picking up. I mean, East 35th Street, I'll be there for
You
that
guys,
105 train.
I can see the two of you, the Tomahawk Steak,
Sure.
Red Oak Keeper, the MX. Thank you.
No, it's nothing too fancy. I won't fleece you for too much. But once you're here, it's like you're going to get a ride down to your final destination.
Yes,
Unless,
exactly.
I don't know if NJ Transit's running from the Middletown station.
No, we'll find a way. So the key thing is this will be my first ferry ride. So we'll check it. I've heard so much positive.
No, you have
feedback.
to take the ferry's the only way to travel, especially in the summertime. So
Yeah, what am I doing?
How much is this ferry?
Oh, the ferry. Let's get to the fare here. I'm seeing $28 one way.
Oh,
one way.
One way.
Which is,
that
look,
seems reasonable.
okay,
It's an hour
what's
cruise ride.
your alternative?
Exactly.
You can sit in Penn Station for the whole weekend, or you can pay 20. Come on, don't be so cheap. Or as you tell me, it's expensive.
And John, just to confirm something that Tom brought up, there are cocktails on this boat, correct?
Yes.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah, all sorts of cocktails. So
Very
it's not a commute. It's an experience.
John Tucker, thank you so much, particularly for getting up this early in the morning. Our surveillance congestion correspondent with wisdom on
his
the
holiday.
ferry. I wonder with all this, and seriously, folks, it's been a huge debate here in the tri-state area. We're getting finally construction of the future.
Yes. So the construction in New Jersey to get some of these train lines better and more tunnels and all that kind of stuff, it is underway, and there are thousands of workers out there, and they're putting up new tracks and new roads and all that kind of stuff. So it's happening, but you got to get there.
If you look at the on-the-deck menu, I mean Tucker's eating there 4 nights a week.
Yep.
The lobster stuffed avocado,
oh baby,
and they go market price.
Yeah.
That always tells me I don't want to know.
You don't want to know. But again, Redo's Amex, they'll take it there, no problem.
Lobster stuffed avocado.
Yeah.
Thank
why
you to
not?
John Tucker for that. That was, why is he home and we're not?
I know, he's smart. He's smart. He knows what he's doing.
About?
Yep.
To the extent it's like a 1-day work week for Tucker as well. The tape is improved. I don't know what else to say other than futures are -10, and we've got a nice bid to the market. Still -3 on the futures. NASDAQ it's perpetually green. I don't know what to say about that. In the 10 o'clock hour, in 45 minutes, intense coverage of BitDog, 74,000 to 63,000.
And nobody can tell you why.
Nobody
it's
can tell you
it's
how.
up, it's down, it's up.
Well, we can't get Belchunas because he's like on a grand tour of Europe.
Yes, exactly.
With
the kids.
We got to get Belchunas back on the world headquarters. Stay with us, folks. An eventful 45 minutes to come. Bloomberg surveillance.
breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got a mix of red and green on the screen. Not much movement, though, as the AI rally shows some signs of slowing. Strategist at Bank of America says inflows, though, to tech funds, they reached a weekly record of $8.7 billion. So we have NASDAQ futures, little change, up about 4 points at 20,036. We have Dow futures, little change, up about a point, 39,576. S&P futures, little change, down about 3 points at 5,541. We have the 2-year yield at 4.70%. That's down 3 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.23%, and that's down 3 basis points. Now, since we talked about the tech inflows, let's talk about shares of NVIDIA. NVIDIA, still lower. This is after CEO Jensen Huang unloaded almost $32 million of shares in the company. What's moving the markets? What's $32 million of shares? Drug companies, Sarepta Therapeutics, up 37%. Its gene therapy received expanded FDA approval. And finally, American Express. They want to help you land that hard-to-get dinner reservation. The company agreed to acquire Tock, which actually provides reservations for those high-end restaurants, for $400 million from Squarespace. Now you can get into the fancy restaurant. Yes, that is your Bloomberg Business Flash.
Do you use this, Paul, like stud like you?
No, please.
He just makes a phone call and he's in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm old school. Just call it.
I'm old school.
Call it
You know what I'm doing a lot? You look at in full disclosure. Michael's does a beautiful, beautiful lunch.
Yes, they do.
And it's becoming packed. It's like you can't get in. And I just sit at the bar.
Yeah.
I just, what's wrong?
Yeah.
That's what I end up doing, is sitting at the bar. It's amazing. This is a joy, and it's Stanford economics, rock solid, bulletproof thinking. A guy named Steve Cohen discovered this guy at Barclays years ago. But the problem is we can't have Dean Mackey on of 0.72 unless the Mets go 8-2 and win 7 in a row.
Solid.
So we've been waiting. I mean, that's all there is to it. Joining us now after a 7-game win streak for his New York Mets, Dean Mackey, and of course Mr. Cohen with his effort to improve the team of Long Island. Dean, I love your note, and at the bottom of it, you do what you've done for years. You inflation adjust our wage. Are we seeing legitimate wage growth into the end of the year?
We are, Tom. The real wage growth has been solid for quite some time, actually, and we think that will continue. And that's really one of the bedrocks for why real consumer spending growth has been healthy through this recovery.
Dean, are you surprised we haven't seen this Federal Reserve start cutting rates already? A lot of folks, both in academia and in practice, feel like the Fed's kind of just behind the curve here. How do you think about that?
I don't think the Fed's behind the curve. I think the economy has proven to be a lot more resilient than they thought. And that takes the pressure off in terms of when they have to cut. And then basically what they're doing now is they're just making sure that inflation is on a downward trajectory before they start those rate cuts. And this actually in many ways will be earlier. If the Fed does cut this year, it will be earlier than the Fed has in the past. Usually in the past, the Fed's waited for some real signs of economic weakness to show through before they start to cut rates. But this Fed is not waiting for that. They're basing it based on inflation alone.
So does that suggest that, are you thinking about a September or December, or for you as an economist, you don't really care? I mean, how much should we be focusing on this Fed?
I mean, it's obviously of great interest to markets whether the Fed cuts in September or December. It doesn't make a huge difference for the economy. Our view is that the next few inflation numbers will be favorable enough to allow them to cut in September. But that's highly dependent on those inflation numbers.
I mean, I got to ask this question because you're working for 0.72, but how do you take the Dean Mackey world and link it into a stock market? Is this a stock market? Is a forecasting model modeling out an effervescent or okay economy and thus stock prices rise?
I mean, I don't, to be clear, I don't try to forecast the stock market, but, the way I think about it, though, is that we have a solid economic backdrop. The Fed's getting ready to cut, And that's a pretty good backdrop for the equity market because we don't have a recession coming. The Fed's not thinking about raising rates. And so I do think that's a favorable backdrop. And that rise in the stock market as well is feeding back into the economy through the stock market wealth effect. That's another boost to consumer spending.
Let me go Stanford on you. Where's nominal GDP? I mean, John Taylor right now, he's very upset out there. Tom, stay on real GDP, real Taylor rule. But where's nominal GDP, Dean Mackey?
Nominal GDP, I think, will be running somewhere in the 5 to 5.5% range.
Wow. Okay, stop there. This is important. What you just heard, folks, is the heart of the matter. And this, everyone's standing around going, woe is me, woe is me. And Dr. Mackey just said 5 to 5.5%. Is that a boom economy, Dean Mackey?
I wouldn't call it a boom. I would call it solid growth. So it's good enough to allow corporate profits to keep rising. That allows corporations to keep spending money and hiring. So it's solid. It's not an overheating economy by any means.
Paul, this is the great miscall of the last 12 months. Remember stagflation and gloomy, ringing. Lisa was like, she almost, she's just. This is outstanding. 5 to 5.5% nominal. That's solid, just as Dean Mackey said.
That is solid. So, Dean, I think if you go do a poll out there, and I know both, presidential candidates are polling like crazy, consumers don't feel like it's a 5.5% economy. Explain to how the consumers are faring out there.
I mean, consumers are spending, to be clear. So that's coming through in the data. The sentiment, though, as you note, is depressed relative to where it seems like it should be based on the economic numbers. And there's a variety of potential explanations. I think one that does resonate with me, I think people are looking at the prices being high relative to, say, 4 years ago. And they're thinking of that as inflation is high, even though inflation, as we define it, has come down. I think that's really at the heart of the matter.
So, as you think about the consumer here, I mean, what are some of the data points you're looking at? It looks like 4% unemployment. That feels like full employment to me out there.
Yeah, I think the fundamentals of consumer spending are still solid. We have household net worth relative to income is at its highest. It's higher than at any point in the 70 years prior to COVID. So households, in that sense, are richer than they've ever been on average. We also have real labor income growth is solid. And as you say, unemployment remains quite low. So people are not fearing layoffs in the way that they sometimes do. So I think the backdrop is pretty solid.
All right, Dean, one final question here. I mean, Pete Alonso, you got right first baseman. He's just not worth what he used to be. But J.D. Martinez, I mean, there's some trade meat for the Mets here as they get settled for 2025. Can you trade J.D. Martinez and get some maximum effect?
Can't comment on that, Tom.
I tried.
I mean, it's still you tried. I mean, I know you got some interest out there.
Oh, he does. I mean, it's Alonso's a little different story. It's interesting. And this shocks me. J.D. Martinez is 36 years old.
Yeah.
He'll always be like 29.
Right.
D. Mackey, thanks for the Mets baseball talk. Go away. Dr. Mackey is with .72, and we thank him for serious economic analysis. He was just a horse at Barclays. He just delivered trenchant. I would equate it with like an Ethan Harris when he was at Lehman and with Bank of America as well. Dean Mackey, they're optimistic on a solid American economy. Are you settled in your travel plans now?
I am settled.
Out on YouTube, they're like concerned.
Thanks to John Tucker, who kind of just gave me the lowdown on how to navigate this whole ferry thing between this Rock of Manhattan and New Jersey.
Is the on-the-deck restaurant right there at the ferry let-off?
Right there.
So you go up and you have a lobster avocado.
Sure.
And,
and get a nice cold beverage. And
Lisa, can we come?
Maybe I shouldn't go the way I'm going.
I get vet bill and kennel fee, and we can take the dogs and everything.
Yeah,
road trip.
Absolutely. I'm buying on the ferry.
Oh, are you?
Exactly. How about
Thank you, Reto.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So we'll see how that goes.
This could become a new thing.
That could become a new Friday thing at the very least.
You could sit up top of the deck and be tanned and rested.
Sure, exactly.
Which ferry line is this?
I can't remember the name, but it's the one that's going to get me to Ginger. And for $28, it better get me there quickly and in style.
Okay. We're doing it right here. We hope your transportation across this nation is smooth and easy as Paul Sweeney's as well. Please stay safe out there. As Rob Carolyn said, out to Indiana.
Yep.
A heat wave. We need to get the markets open. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo alongside Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney with your opening bell report. Wall Street, well, may experience some volatility today. This is ahead of the triple witching. About $5.5 trillion in stock, index, ETF options all expire today. We also have some more economic data on tap. We have a read on existing home sales and the index of leading economic indicators for May. That comes from the Conference Board. So let's check in as the markets open on a Friday. We'll start with the S&P 500. Right now down about 0.1%, 6 points at 5,465. The Dow up 0.1% at 60 points at 39,115. We have the NASDAQ down 0.2%, 39 points at 17,680. The 2-year yield 4.70%. 4.2%. That's down 3 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.23%. That's down 2 basis points. We have spot gold lower, $2,355 an ounce. Brent crude, $85 a barrel. WTI crude at $81 a barrel. That is your opening bell report. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, Mateo, thanks so much. So the ferry, you're on the east side of Manhattan.
Yep.
You don't go by the Statue of Liberty. I think you go between Governor's Island and Brooklyn.
Yep.
You go under the Verrazano Narrow Bridge.
That's what.
You land, and surveillance mathematics, we're helping all, including Paul Sweeney, on his heat wave travels. It's 702 feet from the C Street ferry to on the deck. Can you make it?
I will make that.
Can you make the 702 feet?
There will be an ice cold beverage of my choice waiting for me right there, and that's how you start a summer weekend on the Jersey Shore.
I'm thinking, Lisa, what do you think, Mrs. Keene and me? Like we could, go on the ferry?
Go down to the Jersey Shore.
I don't have to put on a swim. I can go just like this.
Yeah,
cool,
exactly.
calm,
Just have that little lunch down there.
I like it. I like it.
Come on back.
It's a good Friday.
It's a nice move.
David Bianco's taking notes.
Yep.
Joining us now, really important conversation. Seriously, folks. Red and green tape, a little bit better than futures. David Bianco joins us right now. Good morning, sir. It's good to have you here. With DWS, it's like a Deutsche Bank wing, right?
Yeah, the asset management.
Yeah. What are you going to do June 30? What I see right now is a lot of window dressing. People are going, oops, I'm behind. I better buy some things. Is that what's going on right now?
Yeah, there's definitely been anxiety amongst active managers to keep up with this market and to try to figure out a way to keep up with this market without being overly concentrated. Because
how do you do that?
Well, that's the challenge. The benchmarks have become concentrated, and we've got a relentless momentum market. The thing is, the fundamentals are good in terms of earnings growth at those stocks, those Magnificent 7, Grade 8. Maybe it's going to go from G8 to G10, G12. But, so much of the rest of the market has had really sluggish earnings growth, particularly sluggish real earnings growth. I think you'll see the same thing in 2Q results. Maybe a 3% growth at the S&P 492, but 10% growth with the benefit of the Grade 8.
Let's take out Magnificent 8, whatever they are.
Right.
And there's another 480 stocks left. Let's take them down to 100 random stocks. How many of 100 of the rest of the S&P have earnings growth, have free cash flow growth?
The majority do have scant earnings and free cash flow growth, not the healthy mid to upper single digit earnings growth you'd expect, particularly when you have had inflation and pricing power at companies as we have over the past couple of years. I'm not saying things are bad. I'm just saying earnings growth, particularly setting the Grade 8 aside, is not something that really justifies a 22, 23 PE multiple. Now, look, I do think that a 20-ish PE is sustainable as long as 10-year yields stay closer to 4 rather than 5, which is a risk, as long as the 10-year TIPS yield stays under 2, which it is right this moment. But I do think right now is a good time to de-risk and diversify. And I say de-risk because there's still a very good opportunity at 1, 2, 3 year points on the curve, and taking a little bit of credit risk, you'll make your 5%. And I'm doubtful that over the next 2.5 years, there's anything more than 5% total return upside annualized at the S&P. And for the summer, for the summer, I think we're about to turn our attention even more to the elections. We've got the debate next week. We've got the conventions coming up. Obviously, the elections in November. What we'll hear more about is that fiscal policy needs to be addressed after this election. If it's not, and I think it'd be unwise for the Fed to cut before the election, not knowing the outcome. This is an important event, and it's very important for fiscal conditions and thus 10-year yields, and I don't think the Fed should cut before that.
So we're de-risking in part because some of the political uncertainty?
Exactly, and those who think the Fed's going to cut this summer or even in September, I don't think so. Those who think that there's going to be this broadening of health to healthy, strong earnings growth beyond the Magnificent 7, I don't think so, not yet, maybe next year. And these valuations, you go from 22.5 to 20 times this year's earnings is 4,900.
Okay.
And so you can easily have a 10 to 15% decline.
All right. So do we park ourselves in a 2-year Treasury at 4.7%? Do we take any credit risk?
Not a bad idea to overweight that. We're always in equities, but the preference now is for the shorter end of the curve and a little bit of credit risk. And then Not that we have the ones we like and the ones we're concerned about when it comes to the Magnificent Seven, but we are trying to diversify away from the Magnificent Seven because portfolios do benefit from diversification. You never know what's going to happen, and we're adding to the others, and we're adding to foreign equities, but we're not adding to small caps. We've gotten more cautious on small caps for the summer.
With Europe blowing up, and yesterday, Adrian Wooldridge was great on London and the United Kingdom, and Leonor Laurent on France. What a half hour that was on these elections. Do you buy straw hats in winter, and that means you buy Europe blue chips?
Well, yes, I would stick with the larger cap blue chip companies in Europe. And while we do expect European earnings to get back to growth as soon as the second quarter and third quarter, and they've been in a profit recession for a long time. The thing about the European market is it's your typical or quintessential value investors market. And so as long as you think things are going to be okay politically or geopolitically and even economically, and we think things are improving on the earnings front out of Europe, as long as things are okay, and it's hard to crush the European economy. It's a resilient economy, albeit it doesn't grow strongly. As long as things are okay, the valuations provide upside, and we think Europe continues to generate strong returns, and it offers that diversification. We also like Japan, so I'd say IFA in general.
I mean, Paul,
Japan again. Coming out of nowhere.
Mr. Buffet is very big on it.
He is. He's very big. Again, kind of how I mentioned to Tom, I mean, we haven't talked about Japan for 25 or 30 years, and now it's almost every day I hear someone in your position say you're looking at Japan. What's really changed there?
Well, you've heard the governance story. They finally got religion on return on capital and corporate discipline, but they do have good businesses.
Yeah.
And finally, the banks are anticipating a higher interest rate environment, even a little bit higher than here. That will take time. But they have a lot of good industrial companies, machine tools and automation, and even components and materials that are important to semiconductors. The valuations are very reasonable. These are good businesses. It's a diversified index. The yen is really, really weak, and it makes Japanese products affordable. Also, it's under the U.S. security umbrella, which means that's the beachhead for investors into Asia.
Right. Let me swing it back to Europe. Siemens, which I haven't looked at in ages, been a moonshot off the pandemic. Folks, Siemens of Munich, 323,000 employees. Basically, it's ginormous. Dividend growth, single digit, it's there. But I'm sorry, with a limited CapEx, they got some serious free cash flow. And everybody's like beyond gloomy about the German manufacturing model.
And the German economy has been sluggish. And there are probably concerns to be had about auto, given the...
Yeah, but Siemens is not auto.
Exactly. So the thing about it is there are European companies that are very well positioned for the transition to electrification. Like the one you said, and I can think of a few others.
I can't talk about individuals.
I can, but the point is Europe is well positioned for electrification. I think that's known. Many of these industrial companies in the U.S. and Europe are doing well. But look at utility companies. That, I think, is an underappreciated play, not just on electric vehicles, but on data centers.
Paul, I haven't said this in ages. The forward multiple on Siemens, 16.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah, it's been a while.
We used to go, well, I don't know. It's 12 multiple. I don't think they can span out to 16. And now what are we looking at?
But when I think of Siemens, and I think of the German economy, and I think of the export, and I think of the reliance upon China. Siemens, 12% of their revenue, thanks to the PGEO function on the Bloomberg terminal, 12% of their revenue is from China. That doesn't seem egregious to me. I mean, I guess that's a little bit of a discount in the multiple, but
it's amazing how that has become something that people take concern with and discount the multiple over the China exposure, the foreign exposure.
It used to be
the other way around. But electrification's alive and well. There are industrial companies, U.S. and Europe, exposed to it. The other thing that's going on in Europe, and maybe it comes, let's watch the elections in the United States, are carbon credits. And utility companies, electricity prices are going to be going up a lot. Unless the government figures out a way to help subsidize this, and carbon credits could help.
We got to run. David Bianco, thank you so much with DWS. Red and green on the screen with our news in New York City. Michael Barr.
Very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. We are waiting to hear from the Supreme Court later this morning as the justices prepare to hand down more major decisions. Bloomberg's Amy Morris has a preview.
The justices handed down 4 decisions yesterday, leaving 19 more rulings to issue before the court is expected to recess at the end of the month. Now, among them, a ruling on former President Trump's claim that he is immune from prosecution for alleged crimes committed while in office. And the court is expected to rule on whether states that prohibit social media companies from removing posts based on a political view violate free speech. But there is a lot to do before the court is in recess. So after today, the court has now added this coming Wednesday to hand down more decisions. In Washington, Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
Eileen Cannon, the federal judge presiding over the classified documents case against former President Donald Trump, is hearing arguments today on the defense's effort to get the indictment thrown out on grounds that the prosecutor who brought the charges was illegally appointed. President Joe Biden is beginning debate preparations at Camp David. His trip comes as officials in both parties scramble to set expectations for what may be the most high-stakes presidential debate in decades. Biden's team notes he cannot afford an underwhelming performance against Donald Trump Thursday night. Trump's allies are pushing the Republican to stay focused on his governing plans, but they're expecting him to be tested by pointed questions about his claims of election fraud and his legal issues. Finally, yogis around the world are observing today as International Day of Yoga. New research shows many U.S. adults are engaging in the popular practice. This yoga instructor describes the benefits.
You're learning how to focus your mind at your center. And then through that, your balance improves, your strength improves, your focus improves, your mood improves.
Data show that nearly a third of people use yoga to treat and manage pain. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Joining us now, surveillance, inhale deep, exhale deep correspondent Lisa Mateo. Lisa, out at Costco this weekend, the Crystal Cove Home Yoga Pillow Bundle is coming in at $125 for that.
Oh, it's a bargain.
Yoga, I see people with all these accoutrements. Do you use pillows in your yoga? Or do you just do yoga?
Sometimes you have the little cube that'll help you. You know, it'll give you a little extra workout.
Crane is
or it'll help you. For those who need a little extra help with the stretches and stuff. But I just use a mat. That's it.
Are you a yoga person?
That's it. Not really, but I like to do it because I need that extra stretch nowadays.
Yeah, okay. No, I don't.
You know, you need the little stretch in the back, so it works.
Michael Barr, you want to weigh in here?
I got some cubes that'll help me relax, but that's another story altogether.
Ice cubes.
Exactly. I don't know.
Yeah,
it looks tough. I mean, it's not easy. I see these people that are doing yoga and they're sweating like crazy.
Well, there's like stretchy out yoga, but then there's serious yoga.
Because it's a lot of
which is
balance.
Really, it's like,
who needs that?
You know, it's like, then you get the hunk of wood in your bedroom, the Pilates thing.
Yeah. Oh, I have one of those.
Oh,
I have a Pilates
Why
machine.
did I know? Why did I know?
I do.
I am so sorry I brought that story in. Man.
Michael Barr, go away. Right now, I got red and green on the screen. It's like a Friday tape. I'll give you that. BitDog under 64,000 yields interesting. This is Bloomberg's surveillance. Good morning.
24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this Bloomberg Business Flash brought to you by Interactive Brokers. I'm Lisa Mateo. Sorry. Looking at the wrong screen.
Stop doing yoga during the show.
I'm shopping online for a Pilates machine. Okay, here we go. Stocks right now. We'll start with the S&P 500. Still down about 0.2%, 16 points at 5,456. Then we have the Dow down 0.1% at 33,039 at 33 points at 39,101. And we have the Nasdaq down 0.2%, 47 points, 17,672. Let's get to the bond market. The 2-year yield 4.73%. That's down 1 basis point. The 10-year yield 4.25%, and that is little change. Moving the markets have to go to Sarepta Therapeutics. They're soaring. Their shares up 33%. The FDA approved expanded use of the company's gene therapy, and that's the reason for that. The shares soaring. Then we have CarMax. Their shares up about 2%. The first quarter earnings beat estimates. And Spirit AeroSystems, their shares up 4%. It's a report that Boeing near a deal to buy back the aircraft's parts supplier. We have Boeing shares down about 0.1%. And this news just coming in. American Airlines suspending training for new pilots through the end of this year. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
That's interesting with the new lower fees. I'm being inundated with airline come-ons.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of empty airlines, so they're suspending.
So what's going to cost us to get you over to Paris this summer?
Well, they're cutting back. They're cutting back flights, and
I thought there was a shortage of pilots.
Yeah, there's a shortage, but there's also a shortage of passengers right now.
And that's why they suspend the training, right?
Idea. This is well timed. We've been making jokes all day about Paul. Thank you, C Street, for getting Paul Sweeney across First Governor's Island out through the harbor, the magnificent emotion of going through underneath the Verrazano Bridge. And then Eric brought in Anton Posner, and he's CEO at Mercury Resources. We're going to talk infrastructure. We're going to talk shipping, the Red Sea, and all the challenges there. But Anton, I think one of the great givens in America that we ignore is Mass Maritime, or your New York Maritime, SUNY State University of New York Maritime, and what you people do on ships. What was your college experience like at SUNY Maritime? What was it? Give us some color of what's really going on when we train to do shipping worldwide.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me on. Appreciate it. And great asking about the college experience. So fantastic experience at New York Maritime up in the Bronx, tucked underneath the Throgs Neck Bridge. Definitely a non-traditional college experience going in. You go through 2 weeks of indoctrination where you get drilled into the ground by senior cadets and some Marine Corps non-commissioned officers, which was a great learning experience as an 18-year-old. But come out, for those that are not familiar with it, New York Maritime College at Port Schuyler in the Bronx is one of the several state maritime academies scattered throughout the country, and the oldest one. But great experience going out to sea during summers as a cadet on the training ship was a great way to learn ins and outs.
What's going on now? I mean, our extended knowledge of your world at Mercury Resources is Tom Hanks in some movie, and everybody's worried about sharks in the Red Sea. What's really going on in your shipping world at Mercury Resources in a beleaguered Red Sea? Sure, and good thing it's Tom Hanks in the movie where he played Captain Phillips rather than the one where he was stranded on an island, right? But right now we're seeing certainly constant challenges on what's happening in the Red Sea. And as we know, what's happened in the news over the past several years, from the pandemic congestion at major ports, right, to the shutdown of the Suez Canal when the ship got stuck, to low water situations in the Panama Canal, to piracy off the coast of Somalia. It's been a constant challenge. The Houthi situation right now in what's in the Red Sea has gotten dramatically worse. They sank a Greek-owned cargo ship carrying coal a few days ago. Pretty dramatic pictures online. Admiral James Stavridis, former NATO Supreme Commander, wrote in Bloomberg yesterday actually about what's essentially an anemic response from the world community on addressing this situation. So right now we're seeing
ships diverting from the region, going around the Horn of Africa. The container freight market, global container freight market, has skyrocketed as a result because of the additional transit times that are needed to deal with these increased transit times. It's knocked ships out of rotation from port calls that have been planned, locations to take on fuel, to many other disruptions that are having an upwards effect on the freight cost overall in the market. And then that is spilling over into the bulk and break bulk market, which is the world that I work in and that we work in mostly at the Mercury Group on physical commodity trade supply chain. So it's been overwhelming right now what we're seeing.
You mentioned the Panama Canal, and I have a fascination with the Panama Canal and its history. What is the status there with the water levels, and are ships getting through? Is it a reduced number of ships? What's going on there?
Yeah, reduced number of ships. We're seeing today, I just got an update today, we're seeing about 32 to 34 ships per day passing through the canal. A couple of months ago, that was down to in the 20s. So we're seeing a better situation. It's going to be increasing. Right now, the Canal Authority expects to increase the daily transits upward. I think July 22nd is the next decision as to when they're going to increase the number of transits. The water situation has been getting better. Typically, I believe daily transits are in the 40s ships per day, so still down off of where it traditionally has been when the water levels are good.
And now the reason that we booked Anton Posner of Mercury Resources. Anton, the first time I saw one of these things, and I'm not really familiar with the game, and I'm ignorant of your maritime knowledge. I was in Venice in St. Mark's Square, and a cruise ship went by, and I literally dropped my Aperol spritz. I was so shocked. Anton Posner, those ships are basically hotels on water. I'm going to say they're 12 decks, 16 decks tall. Are they safe?
Well, I would say, Tom, that I'm not an expert on the safety on cruise ships that are flagged, have foreign flags flying on their stern. However, these ships are generally safe. They're generally manned by experienced, licensed officers. These cruise ships, vast majority of them, almost all of them in the world, are not American flag vessels, right? And they're not typically flagged by countries that have the same standards as the U.S. So, but if they're calling a U.S. port, or they're calling a port in a country that has strict regulations, EU countries, right, others, they need to follow, and they're subject to local inspection. For example, even a Bahamian or Panamanian flag cruise ship that's calling a U.S. port is subject to being inspected by U.S. Coast Guard and subject to following rules. So, so while my schoolmates from New York Maritime are generally not manning these ships, although some of them do go work under other flags, they're generally safe, right? But with massive amount, you're going to have incidents.
Don't be a stranger. Anton Posner, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate Mercury Resources, real expertise there on shipping, and particularly the difficulties in the Red Sea right now. I have the same thing on the Panama Canal, and it ain't what it used to be because of low water.
Yeah,
I thought your question.
I didn't know that
great.
was a thing until it's so apparently there's a big body of water that services that flows into the canal. And
well, it's only 110 years old. I mean, you think it needs a redo, but
phenomenal. Yeah, it's just extraordinary.
You look at the Suez Canal and some of the challenges there as well. Are you going to be able to leave early like Alex Steele will solo out?
No, I think John Tucker gave me the 105 boat. I think that's going to be my sailing. That's going to be my sailing.
I learned a lot today. Lisa, what do you think? Should we go?
I think so. I think we make it a trip, have some, start the happy hour early. Why not?
Exactly. On the high seas.
On the sea streak. It's a beverage of my choice, and we'll listen to The Cure. Have a good weekend. Stay sensibly cool through the weekend. Bloomberg Surveillance on YouTube.